What if I told you that the final battle against Muzan wasn't the end but the beginning of something far more terrifying? What if everything you thought you knew about the Infinity Castle was a lie? Welcome back to Multiverse of Anime, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of your favorite stories. Today we're exploring a timeline that should never have existed, a reality where the Hashira face something worse than demons, worse than death itself. Picture this. The moon hangs blood red in the sky as our heroes prepare for their final assault on Muzan's fortress. But something is wrong. Terribly wrong. The air tastes of copper and broken dreams. Even Tanjiro's enhanced senses are screaming warnings he doesn't understand. You see, in this twisted version of events, the Infinity Castle isn't just Muzan's stronghold. It's alive, it's hungry, and it's been waiting centuries for this moment. As the Hashira step through those massive doors, expecting to find the demon lord they've hunted for so long, they discover something that makes their blood freeze. The castle doesn't just shift and change like in the original story. It learns, it adapts, it remembers every demon slayer who ever entered, and it's been preparing the perfect trap. But here's where things get really twisted. The Muzan they're about to face isn't whole. Years ago, in a moment of desperation, he split his soul in two. The demon half that craves destruction, and the human half that understands manipulation. They've been playing a game across multiple timelines, testing heroes, breaking them, reshaping reality itself. Imagine Gyu stepping into a chamber where gravity flows upward, where his water breathing creates ice instead of flowing streams. Picture Rengoku facing flames that burn cold, that freeze hope itself. Watch as Mitsuri discovers her love breathing is being turned into a weapon against her own friends. The castle doesn't want to kill them. That would be too simple. It wants to break them. To show them that every choice they've made led to this moment of perfect despair. Tanjiro? Poor Tanjiro is about to discover that his sister Nezuko, his motivation for everything, exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. In some, she's human. In others, she's a demon. In one particularly horrifying reality, she never existed at all. But wait, there's more. As the Hashira fight through chamber after impossible chamber, they begin to realize they're not experiencing this for the first time. They've been here before, multiple times. Each loop, each failure, each moment of hope crushed has been feeding something vast and patient. The entity they thought was Muzan laughs as the truth dawns on them. This isn't the final battle, this is rehearsal number 10,000, and they've failed every single time. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. Remember how Yoriichi was the legendary demon slayer who nearly defeated Muzan centuries ago? In this timeline, he never died. He's been trapped in the castle, forced to watch infinite versions of brave warriors enter his prison and lose their humanity. But Yoriichi has been busy. He's learned something that could change everything. Something about the true nature of demons, humans, and the thin line between salvation and damnation. As Tanjiro draws his black blade, now crackling with otherworldly energy, as Nezuko emerges from her box with eyes that reflect things that shouldn't exist, as the Hashira prepare for a battle that will determine not just their fate, but the fate of every possible reality. One question echoes through the living castle. Who will die in the Infinity Castle? And more importantly, who will remember them when the loop resets again? The answer might surprise you, because in this version of the story, death isn't the worst fate that awaits our heroes. The worst fate is becoming the very thing they swore to destroy, while retaining just enough of their humanity to understand what they've lost. So buckle up, anime fans. We're about to dive into a story where your favorite characters face their darkest hour, where hope itself becomes a weapon, and where the line between hero and monster is written in blood that never dries. This is just the beginning. The castle is waiting, the loops are starting, and somewhere in the darkness, something that used to be human is laughing at the beautiful tragedy about to unfold. Are you ready to discover who will fall, who will rise, and who will pay the ultimate price in the battle for infinite realities? Then stay with us, because this story is about to get very, very dark. Let me take you back to where this nightmare truly begins. Picture the Yubo Ishiki mansion on the night before everything changed forever. The air is thick with tension, and even the birds have stopped singing as if nature itself knows what's coming. Kogogi Ubuyashiki, the master of the Demon Slayer Corps, lies on his deathbed, but his final words aren't the gentle encouragement we'd expect. Instead, his voice carries a weight of terrible knowledge as he whispers to the assembled Hashira about something he's discovered in the ancient texts. The Infinity Castle, he says, his voice barely audible, is not what we believed it to be. Muzan didn't create it. He found it, and it has been waiting for this moment for over 1,000 years. The Hashira exchange worried glances. Rengoku's usual bright demeanor is subdued, his hand resting uncertainly on his sword hilt. Yu stands apart from the others, but tonight his isolation feels different, more like he's protecting them from something rather than simply being antisocial. Shinobu maintains her gentle smile, but her eyes betray a clinical concern that goes beyond her usual worry for her fellow demon slayers. She's been researching something in Tamayo's old notes, something that's been keeping her awake for weeks. The master continues his warning. There are texts that speak of a structure that exists between realities, a place where failed timelines go to die. If those texts are true, then tomorrow night you won't just be fighting Muzan, you'll be fighting every possibility where evil won. Sadami scoffs, but his bravado sounds forced. Old man's fever dreams, he mutters, but his scarred hands are trembling slightly. Even he can feel it in the air, that sense of wrongness that makes veteran warriors check their weapons twice. Mitsuri tries to lighten the mood with her usual cheerfulness, suggesting they all share a meal before the battle, but when she opens the food containers, the rice has turned black, and the smell of decay fills the room. No one mentions it, but everyone notices. Tengen adjusts his headband and speaks with uncharacteristic seriousness. The reconnaissance I did last week, he says slowly, the castle's location keeps shifting. Not just the interior layout, but its actual position in space. That's not demon magic. That's something else entirely. Muichiro stares out the window at the night sky, his young face creased with confusion. The stars are wrong, he murmurs. They're in positions they've never been in before. It's like the sky itself is being rewritten. Xiaomei weeps, but tonight his tears carry a different weight. I can hear it, he says, his massive frame shuddering. In the distance, beyond human hearing, there's a sound like reality itself crying out in pain. Obanai unwraps his bandages slightly, revealing not just his scarred mouth, but something else. Marks on his neck that pulse with a dark energy. Marks that shouldn't exist on someone who's never been bitten by a demon. The most disturbing revelation comes from Tanjiro himself. His enhanced senses, usually so reliable, are giving him Konhitigir information. He smells fear, but also anticipation. He smells death, but also birth. Most unsettling of all, he smells his own scent in places he's never been. I keep having dreams, Tanjiro admits to the group, his voice uncertain. Dreams where I'm in the castle, but I'm not me. I'm someone else wearing my face, making choices I would never make. And in these dreams, Nezuko is there, but she's different. Sometimes human, sometimes demon, sometimes something in between. Nezuko herself seems agitated, more restless than she's been since her transformation back to humanity. She keeps pointing at shadows that aren't there, speaking in half sentences about voices calling her name from somewhere far away. As the night deepens, strange things begin happening around the mansion. Doors open and close by themselves, but not in the way you'd expect from supernatural activity. It's more like reality is glitching, showing them glimpses of other versions of the same rooms where different conversations are taking place. Shinobu shares her most disturbing discovery. In Tamayo's research, she found references to something called the convergence point, a moment when all possible timelines would be forced into a single location. According to the notes, this convergence would require a catalyst, something or someone powerful enough to anchor multiple realities. Muzan isn't trying to win tomorrow night, Shinobu explains, her gentle voice carrying an edge of fear. He's trying to become the anchor point for infinite realities. Every timeline where he won, every possibility where demons triumphed, every version of our world where hope failed, they would all collapse into our reality. The implications hit the Hashira like physical blows. They're not just fighting for their world anymore, they're fighting to prevent their world from being invaded by every possible version where evil succeeded. But the most chilling moment comes when Tanjiro tries to use his sun breathing to calm himself. The technique works, but for just an instant, the flames burn black instead of golden. In that moment, he sees something that will haunt him for the rest of the battle. He sees himself, but not himself. A version of Tanjiro who gave up hope, who let despair consume him, who decided that if he couldn't save everyone, he would save no one. This dark Tanjiro is standing in the Infinity Castle, and he's smiling. The vision lasts only a second, but it's enough. Tanjiro understands now why his master spoke of the castle with such dread. Tomorrow night, they won't just be fighting demons. They'll be fighting every version of themselves that chose differently, every possibility where they failed, every timeline where love wasn't enough. As dawn approaches, the Hashira make their final preparations, but each of them carries a new weight, the knowledge that the battle ahead isn't just about defeating Muzan, it's about proving that their reality, their choices, their version of hope deserves to exist among infinite alternatives. The last thing they see before departing is a crack in the eastern sky, barely visible but definitely there. Through it they catch glimpses of other sunrises, other dawns, other versions of this same moment playing out with different outcomes. The Infinity Castle awaits, and with it the greatest test any of them will ever face. Not just of their strength or skill, but of their very right to call themselves heroes in a multiverse where every possible version of heroism and villainy exists simultaneously. The original timeline is about to shatter, and they're the only ones standing between their world and an invasion of infinite darkness. The moment the Hashira step through the castle doors, everything goes wrong in ways they never could have anticipated. What should have been a coordinated assault becomes a nightmare of confusion and impossible choices. Tanjiro finds himself separated from the group almost immediately, but that's not the strangest part. The strangest part is that he remembers being here before, fighting this exact same battle, making these exact same moves. Yet he also remembers this being his first time in the castle. Both memories feel completely real. The first chamber materializes around him like a twisted ballroom where physics has given up trying to make sense. Staircases lead to nowhere, gravity flows in spirals, and the walls show reflections of people who aren't there. But standing in the center of this impossibility is someone who makes Tanjiro's heart stop. Nezuko. But not his Nezuko. This version of his sister has the wild eyes of a demon, fangs gleaming with fresh blood, and claws that drip with something dark and viscous. Yet she's wearing the bamboo muzzle, and her eyes hold a spark of recognition when she sees him. "Brother," she says, her voice a mix of human love and demonic hunger. "I tried so hard to stay human for you, but in this place, in this timeline, I couldn't fight it anymore." Tanjiro's world shatters. According to his memories, Nezuko was cured. She became human again. She was safe. But the evidence of his senses tells a different story. This Nezuko smells like his sister, moves like his sister, but carries the unmistakable scent of demon blood. Before he can process this revelation fully, the other Hashira begin appearing around him, but they're wrong too. Jiyu is missing his left arm, the stump wrapped in bloody bandages. His eyes hold a haunted quality that goes beyond his usual stoicism. "She bit me, Tanjiro," Gyu says simply. "In the timeline I remember, your sister lost control during our final training session. I had to choose between killing her and letting her complete her transformation. I chose wrong." Sanemi appears next, but his usual aggressive confidence is replaced by something darker. Across his face and arms are marks that look like demon transformations that were forcibly stopped partway through. He's fighting his own body's urge to complete a change that should never have begun. "The girl's turning again," Sanemi growls, but his voice carries pain rather than anger. "We've been here before, Kamado. We fought this battle, and every time someone we care about pays the price for our hesitation." Mitsuri enters the chamber with tears streaming down her face, her usual bright energy dimmed to almost nothing. Her love-breathing techniques feel different, tainted somehow, as if her capacity for love has been turned into a weapon against the people she cares about most. "In the timeline I remember," she says softly, "my love for all of you made me weak when strength was needed. I couldn't bring myself to strike the killing blow against Nezuko when she was attacking innocents. 3 children died because I chose sentiment over duty." The chamber fills with more impossible arrivals. Obanai appears wrapped not in his usual bandages but in actual chails, as if he's been imprisoned by his own guilt. Kiboromaru coils around his neck, but the snake's eyes are wrong, reflecting intelligence that no animal should possess. Tengen materializes in a flash of explosions, but his gems are black instead of their usual brilliant colors, and his movements lack their characteristic flair. He looks like someone who's lost everything that made life worth living. "This isn't flashy at all," he says, but there's no energy behind the words. "We're stuck in some kind of repeating nightmare where every choice leads to tragedy. I've watched my wives die 17 different ways across 17 different timelines." Then the impossible happens. From the shadows steps a figure that stops everyone cold. Rengoku, but not the Rengoku they remember. This version has hollow eyes and flames that burn cold blue instead of warm gold. When he speaks, his voice echoes as if coming from a great distance. "Set your heart ablaze," he says, but the familiar phrase sounds like a broken record, distorted and wrong. Set your heart ablaze, but remember that flames consume everything they touch, including the things you're trying to protect. Tanjiro stares in shock. "Rengoku-san, you died saving us on the Mugen train. You died a hero." The flame-breathing user tilts his head with curiosity that feels alien. "Did I die? Or did I die because I failed? Because I let Akaza escape when I should have pursued him? Because I chose to save a few when I could have prevented the deaths of many?" The chamber around them begins to shift and change, showing them glimpses of other realities, other possibilities. Through translucent walls, they can see thousands of versions of themselves fighting the same battle with different outcomes. In some timelines they win, in others they fail spectacularly, and in a few they never arrive at the castle at all. But what's most disturbing is realizing that they can remember fragments from all these other timelines. Tanjiro remembers dying, remembers watching his friends die, remembers making choices that led to victory and choices that led to absolute defeat. All these memories feel equally real. The Nezuko in front of him begins to change more dramatically, her demon features becoming more pronounced. "Brother, I can feel it happening again. The hunger is getting stronger. In this timeline, the cure didn't work completely. There's still demon blood in my veins, and this place is calling to it." Tanjiro reaches for her, but his hand passes through her as if she's becoming insubstantial. "No, this isn't real. You're human. You're supposed to be human." "Am I?" Nezuko asks, her voice becoming more distorted. "How do you know which line is real? How do you know which version of me is the true one? Maybe the demon Nezuko is real, and the human one was just a beautiful dream." The other Hashira are experiencing their own breakdowns as memories from multiple timelines crash into their consciousness. Shinobu appears, but her gentle smile is cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. The castle is showing us every possible outcome, she explains with clinical detachment that barely conceals her panic. Every choice we could have made, every path we could have taken. It's trying to convince us that all outcomes are equally real, equally meaningless. Muichiro materializes, looking older than his years, as if he's aged decades in minutes. I remember being dead, he says with confusion. I remember dying to protect others, but I also remember never becoming a demon slayer at all. Which life is mine? Jiaomei's massive form appears, but he's weeping more than usual and his tears seem to be flowing upward instead of down. The weight of infinite possibility, he sobs. I can feel every version of every choice I've ever made or could make. The burden is crushing. The chamber reaches a crescendo of chaos as reality itself seems to fracture around them. The walls become mirrors showing different versions of their lives, different choices, different consequences. In some reflections, they're happy, in others, they're broken, and in a few, there's something altogether different from human. That's when the truth hits Tanjiro like a physical blow. This isn't just about fighting Muzan. This isn't just about saving their world. This is about something far more fundamental. The castle is forcing them to confront the fact that every choice creates ripples across infinite realities, and they're being asked to take responsibility not just for their own choices, but for every possible choice they could have made. The version of Rengoku that shouldn't exist steps forward with information that changes everything. Young Kamado, I'm not from your timeline. I'm from a timeline where we won, where everyone lived, where the victory was complete. But that victory broke something fundamental in the structure of reality itself. Tanjiro stares at him in shock. You won? Everyone survived? Everyone survived, but the cost was the creation of a crack in the boundary between possible and impossible. Every demon we killed, every life we saved, every moment of heroism created pressure on the walls between realities. Our victory was so complete that it shattered the barrier, keeping different timelines separate. The revelation is staggering. In trying to create the perfect outcome, the successful Hashira accidentally created the conditions for this nightmare scenario where all outcomes exist simultaneously. Muzan didn't create this situation, Rengoku continues. We did. Our desire for a perfect victory, our refusal to accept that some tragedies are necessary, our insistence that everyone could be saved, it all contributed to breaking down the barriers between what is and what could be. As this knowledge settles over them, the demon Nezuko approaches her brother with desperate urgency. Tanjiro, I need you to know that I love you. In every timeline, in every possibility, that never changes. But in this reality, I'm losing the fight against the demon blood. Tanjiro falls to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of infinite possibility and infinite responsibility. Every choice he makes here won't just affect his timeline, but every timeline. Every decision will ripple across countless realities, creating or destroying infinite possibilities for infinite people. The chamber begins to collapse around them, not physically, but conceptually. The boundaries between different timelines are dissolving, and they're about to face the true scope of what they're up against. Not just one demon lord, but every version of every demon that ever existed or could exist. As reality fractures completely, Rengoku grabs Tanjiro by the shoulders with desperate intensity. Listen to me carefully. This castle isn't Muzan's stronghold. It's a testing ground. Something vast and patient has been using all our battles, all our choices, all our victories and defeats as data. It's been learning how to break heroes, how to corrupt hope, how to turn love into a weapon. The first divergence ends with a revelation that will haunt them through everything that follows. They're not the first group of heroes to face this challenge. They're not even the 100th. They're just the latest in an infinite series of tests, and somewhere in the heart of this impossible castle, something is taking notes on exactly how to destroy everything they hold dear. The timeline resets, but this time, they remember. When reality reassembles itself around them, the Hashira find themselves in a new configuration that feels both familiar and wrong. They're still in the castle, but now they carry the weight of memories that shouldn't exist, knowledge of failures that haven't happened yet, and the terrible understanding that they've been here before. The second chamber appears as a war room where maps of impossible battles cover every surface. But these aren't maps of places, they're maps of choices, showing the branching paths of every decision they could make and the consequences that spiral out from each one. Tengen slams his fist against a wall that dissolves into butterflies at his touch. This is absolutely not flashy, he declares, but his voice carries an edge of desperation. We're trapped in some kind of nightmare where every choice we make has already been made before, and we already know how badly it can go wrong. Sanemi paces like a caged animal, his wind breathing, creating small tornadoes that dissipate into nothing. That's the third time you've said that exact phrase, Uzie. Which means this is the third time we've been in this exact situation. How many times have we failed already? The paranoia starts small, but it grows quickly. When you remember multiple timelines where different versions of your friends made different choices, how do you know which version stands in front of you now? How do you know which memories are real and which are invasive thoughts from alternate realities? Jiyu stands apart from the others, but now his isolation feels different. More protective than antisocial. I remember losing my arm, he says, examining his perfectly intact limb. I remember Nezuko biting me. I remember making the choice to let her drain me rather than fight back. But I also remember training with her yesterday, completely human and in control. Mitsuri wraps her arms around herself, her usual warmth replaced by uncertainty. In one timeline I remember I was too weak to make the hard choices. I let my love for everyone cloud my judgment, and people died because of my hesitation. But in another timeline I remember being too harsh, too quick to violence, and people died because I didn't show enough compassion. The weight of infinite possibility is crushing them, when every choice they could make has already been made in some timeline and they can remember the consequences of all of them. How do you choose anything at all? Obanai unwraps his bandages slightly, revealing the serpent mark that pulses with dark energy. Kaburamaru coils tighter around his neck, and when the snake speaks, its voice is perfectly human. The snake remembers too, Obanai says, with growing dread. He remembers timelines where I made deals with demons, where I traded my humanity for power to protect the people I love. And the worst part is, in some of those timelines, it worked. This is the moment when the real horror begins. Not the fear of external enemies, but the fear of themselves. If they can remember making different choices, if they can remember being different people, then which version of themselves is real? Which set of morals and beliefs actually belongs to them? Shinobu maintains her gentle smile, but her eyes dart between her fellow Hashira with clinical precision. Ara, how fascinating, she says, but the words feel mechanical. We're experiencing memory displacement from parallel timelines. Each of us is carrying the psychological weight of infinite versions of ourselves. Muchiro stares at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I remember being older. I remember being dead. I remember being someone who never lost his memory in the first place. I remember being someone who never had a twin brother at all. Which Muchiro am I supposed to be? The paranoia reaches a breaking point when Jomei makes an observation that chills everyone to the bone. There's a corruption in the air, he says, his massive frame shuddering. Not just demonic energy, something that turns friend against friend, something that makes you doubt the people you trust most. Tanjiro tries to center himself using his enhanced senses, but they're giving him contradictory information. Everyone smells like themselves, but also like slightly different versions of themselves. It's like being surrounded by people wearing masks of familiar faces. What if one of us isn't who they appear to be? Sanemi asks, his hand moving instinctively to his sword. What if one of us is from a timeline where they made different choices, where they chose the wrong side? The question hangs in the air like poison gas. In a situation where everyone remembers being different people with different loyalties, how do you trust anyone, including yourself? That's when Obanai drops the bombshell that changes everything. I need to tell you all something, he says, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. I remember making a deal, not with Muzan, but with something older, something that existed before demons were ever created. The other Hashira step back instinctively, hands moving to weapons, but Obanai continues. In the timeline I remember most clearly, I traded my loyalty for power. Power to protect Mitsuri, power to end the war against demons quickly, power to ensure that no more children would grow up as I did. Mitsuri stares at him in horror. Obanai-san, what did you do? I became the enemy, he says simply. I became the thing we swore to destroy. And in every timeline since, I've been trying to undo that choice, but the castle remembers. It remembers every sin, every betrayal, every moment of weakness from every possible version of ourselves. This revelation opens the floodgates. If Obanai can remember betraying everything he stands for, then what about the rest of them? What dark choices might they have made in other timelines? Midokiro starts laughing, but it's not a pleasant sound. We're all betrayers, aren't we? In some timeline, for some reason, we've all chosen wrong. We've all failed someone we love. We've all made the selfish choice when the heroic one was too difficult. Gyomei weeps harder, his tears falling upward in defiance of gravity. The weight of infinite failure, he sobs. In how many timelines have I let children die? In how many realities have I chosen duty over compassion, or compassion over duty, and been wrong both times? Shinobu's smile finally cracks. And in how many timelines have I chosen revenge over healing? How many times have I let my hatred of demons override my oath to preserve life? How many times have I become the monster I claimed to fight? The emotional breaking point comes when they realize they're not just doubting each other, they're doubting themselves. If you can remember being a hero and a villain, if you can remember making choices that saved everyone and choices that doomed everyone, then what are you really? Tanjiro falls to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of infinite possibility. This is what it wants, he gasps. This is what the castle wants. to turn us against each other, to make us doubt everything we believe about ourselves and each other. But even as he says it, he's not sure he's right. Maybe the doubt is justified. Maybe they should question themselves, question their choices, question whether they're really the heroes they believe themselves to be. And that's when she appears. Kanao standing in the shadows at the edge of the chamber, but her eyes are wrong. Empty, like a doll's eyes. "Shinobu Nisan," she says in a voice devoid of emotion. "I've been waiting for you. Waiting to finish what we started." Shinobu backs away in shock. "Kanao, you're supposed to be safe. You weren't supposed to be here at all." "I did die before you arrived," Kanao says, tilting her head with curiosity that feels inhuman. "But death isn't permanent in this place. Pain is. Betrayal is. The moment you chose the mission over saving me, that became permanent." The betrayal cuts deep because it carries the weight of truth. In how many timelines did the Hashira choose the Raider good over the people they personally cared about? In how many realities did their heroic ideals lead them to sacrifice the individuals they loved most? Kanao draws her blade with mechanical precision. "Do you know how many timelines I've watched you all fail? How many times I've died while you made the calculated choice to let me go in service of the bigger picture?" Tanjiro tries to reason with her. "Kanao, this isn't you. This is the castle. This is whatever force is manipulating our memories and emotions." "Is it?" she asks, her empty eyes reflecting nothing. "Or is this the first time I'm thinking clearly? The first time I'm seeing you all for what you really are? Heroes who talk about protecting everyone but always seem to have reasons why certain people don't count." The alliance fractures completely when Sanemi decides he's had enough of psychological warfare and draws his sword. "I don't care if you're possessed, manipulated, or just having a breakdown. You're threatening my comrades." But Tengen stops him. "Sanemi, wait, we don't know what's real anymore. We don't know which version of any of us is the true one." "That's the point," Jiu says quietly. "We can't trust our memories. We can't trust our perceptions. And apparently we can't trust each other. How do we fight an enemy when we can't even be sure who we are?" The chamber begins to shift again, but this time it's responding to their emotional turmoil. Their doubt, their fear, their questioning of everything they believe about themselves is feeding something. The castle is growing stronger with every moment of uncertainty. Mitsuri makes one last desperate attempt to hold them together. "We're still family," she says through tears. "Whatever happened in other timelines, whatever choices we might have made, right here, right now, we're still the people who chose to protect others." But Obanai, still carrying the weight of his remembered betrayal, shakes his head. "Are we? Or are we just the people who tell ourselves we're protecting others while we make choices that serve our own psychological needs?" The section ends with the horrifying realization that their greatest enemy isn't Muzan, isn't demons, isn't even the castle itself. Their greatest enemy is the doubt that comes from knowing too much, from seeing too many possibilities, from carrying the weight of infinite versions of themselves and being unable to distinguish between who they are and who they could have been. As the chamber dissolves around them once again, they face a question that will haunt them through everything that follows. If you can remember being both hero and villain, if you can remember making every possible choice with every possible outcome, then what does it mean to choose anything at all? The alliance is broken not by external force, but by the weight of infinite self-knowledge. And somewhere in the heart of the castle, something ancient and patient is taking notes on exactly how to break heroes by showing them too much truth about themselves. The castle's response to their psychological breakdown is swift and merciless. Reality fractures like a broken mirror, and suddenly the Hashira find themselves separated across 4 interconnected battlefields that defy every law of physics and logic they've ever known. The chamber of infinite warfare materializes around them with walls that breathe, floors made of crystallized screens, and a ceiling that shows not sky but an ocean of blood that never falls. Gravity flows in spirals, time moves in waves, and each step they take leads them deeper into a maze, dazed by something that understands war better than any human strategist ever could. Tanjiro draws his black blade, but even the familiar weight of his weapon feels wrong here. The sword seems heavier, as if it's absorbing something from the atmosphere around them. "Everyone stay together," he shouts, but even as the words leave his mouth, the floor beneath them fractures along lines that seem to follow their relationships rather than any physical logic. Sanemi finds himself hurled into the first battlefield, a chamber where thousands of swords float in the air like deadly stars. But these aren't ordinary weapons. Each blade sings with the voice of a demon he's killed, and as his wind-breathing techniques tear through the air, the swords begin to move with purpose. First form, Dust Whirlwind Cutter. Sanemi roars, sending a tornado of cutting wind through the floating arsenal. But instead of destroying the blades, his technique awakens them. Each sword begins to move independently, attacking him with the fighting style of its original demonic owner. What makes this battle truly nightmarish is the realization that these aren't just weapons, they're memories given form, manifestations of every life he's taken, every choice that led to violence. A blade cuts across his cheek and he tastes not blood but regret. Another slices his arm and he feels not pain but the weight of every life he couldn't save. The swords whisper as they attack, speaking in the voices of demons he's killed. You enjoyed it, they hiss. You enjoyed the violence, the power, the feeling of being righteous while you destroyed us. And the worst part is, some of their accusations carry the sting of truth. Sanemi fights with desperate fury, but for every blade he breaks, two more appear. The chamber fills with the sound of metal on metal, like 1,000 funeral bells ringing for the dead. I chose to be a demon slayer, he growls through gritted teeth, and I'd choose it again, but I didn't choose to enjoy it. Meanwhile, Jiu discovers himself in a sphere where gravity pulls in all directions simultaneously. Water from his breathing techniques freezes midair, creating a maze of ice around him that reflects his face from impossible angles. But he's not alone in this twisted space. Rengoku is here, but this version moves with flames that burn reality itself, leaving trails of nothingness in his wake. When he attacks, his fire doesn't just burn physical matter, it burns the concept of things, leaving gaps in existence where objects used to be. Water and fire, the eternal dance, Rengoku says, his voice echoing from multiple directions at once. But in this place, we're not opposites, we're the same tragedy told in different colors. Jiu responds with his 11th form, dead calm, creating a sphere of absolute stillness around himself. But Rengoku's flames burn through tranquility itself, forcing Jiu to realize that this battle isn't about winning or losing. It's about understanding something fundamental about the nature of their conflict. You're not trying to kill me, Jiu realizes as he dodges another reality-burning attack. You're trying to show me something. Very good, Rengoku replies, his flames forming shapes that tell stories. Every attack is a memory from a different timeline where we fought side by side. Every flame is a moment of friendship, of trust, of shared purpose. I'm showing you what we're fighting to preserve. The battle becomes a dance of elements, water and fire creating steam that rises in impossible directions, forming clouds that rain memories instead of water. Jiu begins to understand that this isn't combat, it's communication. Rengoku is teaching him something about the nature of their bond that transcends individual timelines. In the third battlefield, Mitsuri and Obanai find themselves together in a garden that looks beautiful from a distance, but reveals its horror up close. Every flower is made of crystallized tears, every tree grows weapons instead of leaves, and the very air carries the scent of love turned poisonous. Mitsuri's love-breathing techniques feel different here, tainted by the environment around them. Her strength is increasing beyond human limits, but she can feel something changing in her heart as well. The pure love that powers her techniques is being corrupted into something possessive and destructive. Obanai-san, we need to work together, she says, but her voice carries an edge as desperation. Whatever happened in other timelines, right now we're here and we're us. Obanai draws his blade, but he's not attacking the garden around them, he's attacking Mitsuri herself, his serpent breathing techniques aimed at cutting away the demonic influence that's trying to take root in her soul. Second form, Venom Fangs of the Narrowhead, he calls out, but his strike is precise, surgical, designed to harm the corruption without harming the person carrying it. I'm not fighting you, Mitsuri, I'm fighting for you. The battle becomes an intricate dance of protection and purification. Obanai attacks the growing demonic presence around Mitsuri, while she fights to maintain her humanity against the garden's influence. Every strike he makes is an act of love. Every dodge she performs is an act of trust. In the timeline where I made the deal, Obanai explains as they fight, you were the first to fall, not to enemies, but to the power that was meant to protect you. I won't let that happen again. At the center of all four battlefields, Tanjiro finds himself in the eye of the storm, able to see his friends fighting but unable to reach them. This is where the castle's true power lies, in isolation, in forcing heroes to face their demons alone while their friends fight their own battles just out of reach. He begins using all 13 forms of sun breathing in continuous sequence, but each form is enhanced now by the memories of fallen friends and powered by the collective will of everyone who ever chose hope over despair. First form Dancing Flash creates pathways through the chaos. Second form Clear Blue Sky burns away false realities. Third form Raging Sun protects his friends from dimensional tears. Each technique serves not just as an attack, but as a lifeline connecting the separated battlefields. I can see it now, Tanjiro realizes as his enhanced senses pierce through the castle's illusions. This place doesn't just want us to fight, it wants us to fight alone, to believe that we're isolated, that our struggles don't matter to anyone else. That's when Zenitsu appears, but he's different too. His usual cowardice has been replaced by a grim determination that's almost frightening. Tanjiro, he says, his voice steady for perhaps the first time since they've known each other. I can hear it. The castle has a heartbeat. It's not just a building, it's alive. Zenitsu's enhanced hearing has revealed something crucial. The castle isn't just a structure, it's a living entity that feeds on conflict, on isolation, on the breakdown of bonds between people. Every moment they spend fighting separately makes it stronger. First form Thunderclap and Flash, sixfold. Zenitsu calls out, but his technique doesn't just create lightning, it creates a pulse that synchronizes with the castle's heartbeat, disrupting its rhythm like a cardiac defibrillator applied to a building. The disruption creates an opening, a moment of vulnerability that reveals the true scope of what they're facing. From the chaos emerges a figure that makes everyone's blood freeze. Another Muzan, but this one is different from any they've encountered before. This Muzan is incomplete, like a rough sketch of the Demon Lord, constantly shifting between different possible forms. How fascinating, it says in a voice that echoes with the sound of infinite possibility. You've learned to work together across separated spaces, but you're still thinking too small. Another Muzan? Tanjiro gasps, his grip tightening on his transformed blade. I'm what Muzan becomes when he learns to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. The entity explains with casual pride, I'm every version of him that ever was or could be, consolidated into one being. I'm not just a demon lord, I'm the concept of demons given form. The revelation hits them like a physical blow. They're not just fighting one overpowered enemy, they're fighting the philosophical concept of evil itself, made manifest and given the power to reshape reality. Senemi appears from his battlefield, covered in wounds that represent every moral compromise he's ever made. So we're not just fighting demons, we're fighting the idea of demons. Jiyu emerges from his sphere with water still dripping from his blade, but the water carries memories of every friendship he's ever valued. The Rengoku in my battle warned me. He said the real fight isn't against evil, it's against the idea that power inevitably corrupts. Mitsuri and Obanai return together, her strength purified by his protection, his determination strengthened by her love. And we learn that love without boundaries becomes possession, while boundaries without love become cruelty. The conceptual Muzan laughs at their realizations. You're beginning to understand the scope of what you face. Every choice creates ripples, every ripple creates new possibilities, and every possibility feeds into me. I become more complete with every timeline you create, while you become more fractured with every choice you make. The battle has taken its toll on all of them. Zenitsu collapses, his nervous system overloaded from synchronizing with the castle's heartbeat. Tsunemi is covered in wounds that won't heal because they represent moral injuries rather than physical ones. Jiyu moves slower, as if carrying the weight of infinite possibilities on his shoulders. But they've learned something crucial. The enemy they face isn't just powerful, it's patient. It's in using every battle they've ever fought, every choice they've ever made, every victory and defeat as data to construct the perfect trap. Every timeline you experience, the conceptual Muzan explains with satisfaction. Every loop you complete, every version of yourselves you encounter, it all feeds into me. I become more complete while you become more fractured. Tanjiro realizes the horrifying scope of their situation. They're not just fighting for their lives or their world, they're fighting against the accumulated weight of infinite possibility, against an enemy that grows stronger with every choice they make and every outcome they create. As the chamber begins to fracture again, Rengoku appears one final time with a warning that will haunt them through everything that follows. The castle is preparing to shift again, but this time it's not just changing locations, it's changing the fundamental rules of reality itself. What does that mean? Tanjiro asks desperately. The next phase isn't going to show you alternate timelines, Rengoku explains with growing urgency. It's going to make you choose which timeline becomes real, and whichever one you choose, all the others will be erased. Everyone you've ever known in those other realities will cease to exist. The conceptual Muzan smiles with infinite satisfaction. Choose carefully, demon slayers. The weight of infinite genocide rests on your decision. Will you save your reality by destroying all others, or will you choose nobility and watch everything you care about fade into non-existence? As the chamber collapses into blinding light, they're faced with a choice that no hero should ever have to make. Save their world by committing genocide against infinite realities, or maintain their moral purity while watching everything they love disappear. The second assault ends not with victory or defeat, but with the realization that they're facing an enemy that understands the deepest philosophical foundations of heroism and is using that understanding to create scenarios where every choice is wrong. As reality fractures around them once again, Tanjiro and Shinobu find themselves pulled through a crack in space into a chamber that doesn't seem to belong to any timeline they've experienced. Here, floating in crystalline cases that pulse with inner light, are the preserved memories of every demon slayer who ever lived and died. Ara, Shinobu murmurs, her clinical fascination overriding her fear as she examines the memory crystals. These aren't just recordings, they're complete consciousness archives. Every thought, every experience, every moment of pain and triumph perfectly preserved. Tanjiro approaches one of the crystals with caution, drawn by a warmth that reminds him of home. This one smells like my father, he says, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. But that's impossible, he never fought demons. The crystal pulses at his touch, and suddenly they're not in the memory chamber anymore. They're experiencing his father's memories from years before Tanjiro was born, from a time when the knowledge of demons was kept secret from most of the world. In the memory, they see Tanjiro's father meeting with a woman who carries the scent of medicine and ancient knowledge, Tamayo, but younger, less burdened by centuries of guilt and research. The greatest secret I never told anyone, Tamayo's recorded voice echoes through the memory space, is that Muzan didn't just become the first demon, he became the first demon twice. Shinobu's analytical mind immediately begins processing this information. Twice? How is that possible? You can't become something you already are. The memory shifts, showing them Tamayo's hidden laboratory from decades past, filled with research that spans centuries. Charts and diagrams cover every surface, showing the evolution of demonic power, the development of demon slayer techniques, and something else. Something that makes Tanjiro's blood run cold. The first time Muzan became a demon, Tamayo's memory explains, he was human. The first time Muzan became a demon, Tamayo's memory explains, he was human, a sick, dying man who consumed a blue spider lily and transformed into something unprecedented. But that first transformation was incomplete. He retained too much of his humanity, too much capacity for doubt, too much ability to feel guilt and regret. The memory chamber shows them images that challenge everything they thought they knew about the Demon Lord. The first Muzan wasn't the confident, cruel entity they've been fighting. He was tormented, constantly at war with his own nature, struggling between his human conscience and his demonic hunger. What happened to make him complete? Tanjiro asks, though part of him already dreads the answer. He made a choice that no being should ever make, Tamayo's memory continues. He chose kill his own soul, not his body, not his mind, but his soul itself. He split his consciousness in two, keeping only the demon half and casting away everything human. The implications hit them like physical blows. If Muzan split his consciousness, then somewhere in existence is the human half that was cast away. The part of him that could feel compassion, that could experience regret, that could potentially choose good over evil. Shinobu's scientific mind races through the possibilities. So there are two versions of Muzan's consciousness existing separately, the demon half that we've been fighting, and the human half that was discarded. But where did the human half go? Tanjiro asks, though he's beginning to suspect the answer will be worse than anything he can imagine. The memory chamber shifts again, showing them flashes of demon slayers throughout history. But in each image, there's something wrong. A shadow standing just out of sight, a figure watching from the darkness, someone who's always present but never quite visible. The human half didn't disappear, Tamayo's memory reveals. It couldn't disappear. Souls don't simply cease to exist. So it found new vessels, new hosts, new ways to influence the world. And it's been growing stronger by feeding on the one thing the demon half cannot access. What's that? Shinobu asks, though her expression suggests she's already piecing together the horrifying truth. Guilt. Regret. The desire to save everyone. The human half of Muzan has been feeding on the compassion of demon slayers, growing stronger every time a hero wondered if there was another way to save demons instead of killing them. The revelation is like ice water in their veins. Every moment of mercy, every instance of wondering if demons could be redeemed, every time they hesitated to strike a killing blow, they were feeding something that was using their compassion against them. The human half has been manipulating events from the shadows, Tamayo's memory continues. Every time a demon slayer has felt doubt about their methods, every time they've questioned whether demons could be saved instead of destroyed, they've been influenced by this discarded fragment of Muzan's humanity. The memory shows them something even more disturbing. Images of demon slayers throughout history, but now they can see the signs they missed before. Moments when someone's eyes went flat, when their smile became too perfect, when their words carried just the hint of manipulation. How long has this been going on? Tanjiro asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Since the beginning, the memory replies, the human half of Muzan has been playing a game that spans centuries. Every demon slayer core, every breathing technique, every strategy for fighting demons, it's all been influenced to some degree by this patient, calculating intelligence. Shinobu examines the phantom research materials floating around them in the memory space. But what's its endgame? What does the human half of Muzan want? Reunification, Tamayo's memory explains. It wants to merge with its demon half again, not to become whole, but to become something new. Something that combines the raw power of demons with the strategic intelligence and emotional manipulation of humanity. The thought of such a creature is terrifying enough, but Tamayo's memory has one more revelation that changes everything. The castle isn't just a battlefield, the recorded voice continues. It's a laboratory. Every timeline, every possibility, every version of events is an experiment. The human half of Muzan is testing variables, seeing how different circumstances affect outcomes, learning exactly how to break heroes by understanding what makes them heroic. We're not fighting for our lives, Shinobu realizes with growing horror. We're test sets. Every choice we make, every strategy we try, every moment of success or failure, it's all data being collected and analyzed. Tanjiro feels sick as the full scope of their manipulation becomes clear. Every time we've died, every time we've failed, every time we've succeeded, it's all been information to help the two halves of Muzan understand how to merge perfectly. The memory chamber shows them one final devastating truth. In some timelines, the human half of Muzan has been masquerading as their allies, as friends, as family members. Any vessel that carries enough guilt or regret can be possessed, influenced, or replaced entirely. The betrayals we've witnessed, Tanjiro says, his enhanced senses now detecting traces of manipulation in memories he thought were pure. The way our allies have turned against us, it might not be the castle's influence at all. The human half can inhabit any consciousness that carries sufficient self-doubt, Tamayo's memory confirms. It feeds on emotional vulnerability and grows stronger through manipulation. Every time someone questions whether they're good enough, strong enough, worthy enough, they create an opening for influence. The memory space fills with mirrors, each one showing different versions of their friends and allies throughout their battles. But now, knowing what to look for, they can see the signs. The moments when someone's personality shifted slightly, when their priorities changed without explanation, when their words carried implications that served agendas they didn't understand. How do we fight an enemy that can be anyone? Tanjiro asks desperately. How do we trust each other when trust itself has been weaponized against us? We don't, Shinobu replies with clinical detachment that barely conceals her own fear. We accept that the human half of Muzan has been playing a game we didn't know we were part of, but knowing the rules changes everything. Tamayo's memory provides them with one final piece of crucial information. The human half made one critical error. It assumed that understanding human nature would give it power over humans, but it never truly understood the one thing that makes humanity stronger than any manipulation. What's that? Tanjiro asks. Humans don't just adapt to survive, the memory explains. They adapt to protect others, even when it costs them everything, even when it seems impossible, even when hope itself appears to be a lie designed to manipulate them. As the memory chamber begins to dissolve, they're shown one last image. Tamayo in her laboratory working desperately on a formula that could separate the two halves of Muzan permanently, preventing the reunion that would create something more dangerous than either half alone. If we can't trust our allies and we can't trust ourselves, Shinobu says as they're pulled back toward the main battle, then we need to trust the one thing the human half of Muzan can't manipulate. What's that? Tanjiro asks. Pure instinct, she replies. The moment of decision when there's no time to think, no time to doubt, no time for the human half to whisper suggestions. We need to act on emotions so immediate and honest that even the most sophisticated manipulation can't touch them. As reality reasserts itself around them, they carry with them the terrible knowledge that their enemy is not just powerful but patient. It's been planning this confrontation for centuries, using their own compassion and self-doubt against them. But they also carry something else, the understanding that while the human half of Muzan may understand human nature, it doesn't understand human spirit. The part of humanity that chooses to protect others even when protection seems impossible, that chooses hope even when hope seems foolish, that chooses love even when love has been turned into a weapon. The demon half of Muzan is the monster we can see, Tanjiro says as the chamber fades completely. But the human half is the monster we can't, the one that's been manipulating us all along, using our best instincts against us. And now they're trying to merge, Shinobu adds grimly, to become something that has both the power to destroy and the intelligence to manipulate. Something that understands both strength and weakness from the inside. As they rejoin the battle, they face a terrifying new reality. They're not just fighting demons anymore. They're fighting psychology itself, manipulation refined across centuries, and the accumulated weight of every doubt and regret that's ever touched a hero's heart. The dual Muzan theory reveals that their greatest enemy isn't just evil, it's evil that understands good, darkness that comprehends light, and manipulation so sophisticated that it turns virtue into vulnerability. But perhaps most terrifying of all is the final question that haunts them as they prepare for what's coming next. If the human half of Muzan can possess anyone with enough guilt or regret, and if they've all been carrying the weight of infinite timelines worth of failure and doubt, then which one of them might already be compromised? The answer to that question will determine not just the outcome of their battle, but the fate of every reality that ever was or could be. Time doesn't just fracture around Tanjiro this time, it completely rebuilds itself and is something that should be impossible but feels more real than anything he's ever experienced. When consciousness returns to him, he's not in the castle at all, he's home. The scent hits him first, his mother's cooking, the particular combination of miso and mountain herbs that he thought he'd never smell again. Then comes the sound of laughter, genuine and carefree, drifting through the walls of their mountain home. Snow falls gently outside the windows, and the warmth of the hearth makes everything feel safe and perfect. Big brother, you were having another nightmare, Nezuko says. But this isn't the Nezuko he's been fighting to save. This is Nezuko as she should have been. Fully human, completely whole, with no trace of fangs or claws or the haunted look of someone who's fought monsters. She looks exactly as she did before that terrible night when Muzan destroyed their family. Except now she's older, having grown up in peace instead of sleeping in a box. Her eyes hold the wisdom of someone who's lived a full, happy life, unmarked by tragedy. Tanjiro stares at her, his heart breaking with the perfection of it all. Nezuko, you're human, you're completely human. Of course I'm human, she laughs. The sound like silver bells in the mountain air. What else would I be? You've been having those strange dreams again, haven't you? The ones about demons and castles and me being some kind of monster. The word monster hits him like a physical blow. In this timeline, in this perfect reality, demons never existed. Muzan never found their mountain home. Their family lived, thrived, grew old together in peace and happiness. Tanjiro became a demon slayer not to avenge his family but to protect them, driven by stories of creatures in distant lands rather than personal tragedy. He learned sun breathing not from ancestral memory awakened by loss, but as a family tradition passed down through generations of protectors. But the castle, Tanjiro says, touching his head where memories of impossible battles feel suddenly distant and dreamlike, the loops, the multiple timelines, Muzan splitting into two halves. Nezuko places a gentle hand on his forehead with the practiced care of someone who's been dealing with a beloved brother's recurring nightmares for months. You've been having these dreams ever since you came back from your last mission. The village elders think you might have been exposed to some kind of hallucinogenic demon blood. The explanation is so rational, so perfectly reasonable that Tanjiro wants desperately to believe it. What if everything else was the dream? What if this perfect life with his family safe and whole is the reality he's been fighting to return to? His mother appears in the doorway, alive and radiant, her face unmarked by the terror of that final night. Tanjiro, breakfast is ready. Your father wants to talk to you about taking over the charcoal business now that you're getting older. The domestic normalcy is overwhelming. This is everything he's ever wanted, everything he's fought for, everything he's been willing to die to protect. A world where his family is safe, where Nezuko is human, where the weight of infinite responsibility has never touched their lives. He spends the day living this perfect life, helping with chores, playing with his younger siblings, listening to his mother hum while she works. Every moment is exactly as he remembers from childhood, but better, because now he can appreciate what he has instead of taking it for granted. But as the day progresses, small details begin to feel wrong. Nezuko never gets frustrated, never shows anger, never has any of the small moments of irritation or sadness that make humans real. She's too perfect, too consistently cheerful, like someone playing a role rather than living a life. Nezuko, Tanjiro says carefully, do you ever get angry about anything? Her smile never wavers, bright and constant as sunlight. Why would I be angry? Everything is perfect here. We're all happy all the time. But everyone gets angry sometimes, Tanjiro presses. It's natural, it's human. Not here, she says, and for just a moment her voice sounds mechanical, rehearsed. Here, negative emotions don't exist. Here, we're all content with our lives exactly as they are. The conversation sends chills down Tanjiro's spine. Real people don't talk like that. Real people have bad days, moments of doubt, flashes of irritation or sadness. The absence of negative emotions isn't paradise, it's a symptom of something deeply wrong. As night falls, he begins to notice other impossibilities. The sun never actually moved across the sky during the day. The same birds sang the same song at exactly the same time every hour. His siblings repeated conversations they'd had that morning, using the exact same words with the exact same inflections. This isn't real, Tanjiro whispers to himself as he sits by the window, watching snow fall in patterns that repeat every few minutes. This is another test, another manipulation. But even as he says it, part of him doesn't want it to be true. The warmth, the safety, the presence of his family, it all feels so good after the nightmare of the castle. Why shouldn't he stay here? Why shouldn't he choose happiness over endless struggle? That's when he appears. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but simply stepping out of the shadows as if he's always been there. The human half of Muzan, but not appearing as a monster or a demon. Instead, he looks like a kind, gentle person, someone who radiates compassion and understanding. I can make this permanent, Tanjiro, he says in a voice filled with genuine warmth. I can give you a timeline where your family never dies, where demons never existed, where you can live in peace for the rest of your natural life. Tanjiro's hand moves instinctively toward his sword, but the weapon isn't there. In this timeline, he's never needed to draw it in anger. What's the price? Stop fighting, the human Muzan says simply. Stop resisting. Let me merge with my Mim in half, and I'll create a world where no one has to suffer, where no families are destroyed by monsters, where no children grow up as orphans seeking revenge. The offer is everything Tanjiro has ever wanted. A world without demons, without the need for demon slayers, without the endless cycle of violence and loss that has defined his life. All he has to do is stop fighting for something he's not even sure is real anymore. What about everyone else? Tanjiro asks, though his voice wavers with uncertainty. What about the people in other timelines who are still fighting, still suffering? They're not real, the human Muzan says with gentle patience, like a teacher explaining something to a confused child. They're just possibilities, echoes of things that might have been. Only this timeline matters. Only your family matters. Only your happiness matters. The temptation is almost overwhelming. Tanjiro looks at his family, sleeping peacefully in their beds, safe and whole and human. He looks at Nezuko, dreaming whatever dreams people have when they've never been monsters. He looks at his parents, growing old together in love, rather than dying in terror. But then, the memories begin to bleed through. Not his memories of this perfect timeline, but memories from the castle, from the battles, from the friends who fought beside him. Rengoku's sacrifice, Shinobu's determination, Gyu's quiet strength, all the people who've died to protect others, all the families who've been destroyed. They are real, Tanjiro says, his voice growing stronger. Every timeline is real. Every version of every person is real, and deserves a chance to live, to choose, to grow. The human Muzan's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in the air around them. Even if choosing to help them means giving up your own happiness, even if it means your family remains dead in every other timeline, even if it means you'll spend your life fighting battles you can't win. Tanjiro looks one last time at his perfect family, sleeping peacefully in their perfect home. The pain of what he's about to do feels like it might kill him, but he knows what he has to do. I choose everyone, he says, drawing a sword that materializes in his hand as his resolve crystallizes. I choose the right to struggle, to fail, to hurt, to grow. I choose the right for everyone to have their own story, not just the one you think is perfect. You're choosing strangers over your family, Nezuko says, but her voice has changed. The perfect cheerfulness is gone, replaced by something sad and disappointed. I'm choosing the right for my family to be real, Tanjiro replies, his heart breaking. Even if being real means they can suffer, even if being real means they can die, even if being real means I might lose them. As he raises his blade, not to attack but to reject the illusion, the perfect timeline begins to collapse around him. But instead of dissolving into nothing, it reveals its true nature. This isn't an illusion or a dream. This is a real timeline, a real possibility, where real versions of his family chose safety over authenticity. His real family appears as the illusion falls away, and they're exactly as perfect as they seemed. But now he can see the price of that perfection. They're real people who were offered the same choice he was, and they chose the safe illusion over dangerous reality. We chose to stay. Big brother, his real Nezuko says, but now her voice carries the weight of genuine sadness. We were so tired of fighting, so tired of being afraid, so tired of losing people we love. This timeline might be artificial, but the peace is real. The revelation is more painful than any physical wound. His family didn't choose him. They chose safety, comfort, the guarantee that they would never have to face loss or pain or uncertainty again. They chose a beautiful prison over dangerous freedom. I have to leave you, Tanjiro says, tears streaming down his face. I have to choose the world where you can be both safe and free, even if that world doesn't exist yet. His real mother steps forward and embraces him one last time. We know you do, my son, and we love you for it. That's why we can let you go. The goodbye is more painful than watching them die would have been, because this isn't death. This is conscious separation, the choice to walk away from happiness in service of something larger than personal contentment. As the timeline dissolves around him, Tanjiro carries with him a new understanding of what they're fighting for. They're not just fighting for survival or victory. They're fighting for the right to choose their own destiny, even when that destiny includes pain, loss, and uncertainty. He awakens back in the castle, but he's changed. The weight of seeing his family safe but trapped in an artificial paradise has given him new strength, new resolve, and new understanding of what love really means. Sometimes love means letting people make choices you disagree with, even when those choices break your heart. But when he opens his eyes, he discovers something that makes his blood freeze. Kanao is there, fighting beside them, moving with perfect precision and deadly grace. But she wasn't there before. In the previous timeline, Shinobu said she was dead. Kanao, Tanjiro says carefully, when did you get here? She turns to him with a smile that's too perfect, too measured, too much like the artificial happiness of his family's prison timeline. I've been here all along, Tanjiro, fighting beside you, protecting you. But Tanjiro's enhanced senses are screaming warnings. She smells wrong, not like a different person, but like the same person wearing a mask. Like someone pretending to be Kanao while being something else entirely. You're not her, he realizes with growing horror. You're the human half of Muzan wearing her face. The false Kanao's smile doesn't waver. I'm whatever you need me to be, friend, an ally, a sister. I can be the family you left behind, the connections you sacrificed for principle. The manipulation is sophisticated beyond anything he's faced before. The human half of Muzan isn't just offering him power or victory, it's offering him the thing he wants most, the people he's lost, the connections he's severed in service of larger ideals. I can be your Nezuko, the false Kanao says, her appearance shifting. I can be your family, your friends, anyone you've lost or left behind. All you have to do is stop fighting. All you have to do is let me give you what you really want. Tanjiro raises his sword, now blazing with solar fire that burns away illusions and reveals truth. What I really want is for everyone to have the freedom to choose who they become, including you. The battle that follows isn't just physical, it's philosophical, emotional, spiritual. The human half of Muzan attacks not with claws or fangs, but with perfect replicas of everyone Tanjiro has ever loved, each one offering him a different version of happiness if he'll just stop fighting for something larger than himself. But Tanjiro has learned something crucial in the artificial paradise. Love isn't about keeping people safe from all harm. Love is about giving people the freedom to choose their own path, even when that path leads away from you, even when that choice breaks your heart. I don't love you because you're safe, he says to the parade of false friends and family. I love you because you're real, because you have the right to make your own choices, even if those choices hurt me. His sun breathing cuts through the illusions, but more importantly, it cuts through the lie that love requires control. Real love requires letting go, requires trusting people to choose their own paths, requires accepting that sometimes the people you love most will choose something other than you. As the second timeline collapses and reality reasserts itself, Tanjiro carries with him a painful but crucial truth. He's not fighting to get his old life back. He's fighting to create a world where everyone, including his enemies, has the right to choose who they become. The human half of Muzan retreats, but not in defeat. In fascination, it has learned something new about human psychology, something about the difference between love that controls and love that liberates. And that knowledge will make it more dangerous than ever. Muichiro finds himself alone in a chamber that exists outside normal space and time, surrounded by mist that whispers with voices he recognizes but shouldn't be able to hear. This isn't the gentle fog of his mist-breathing technique. This is something alive, something that carries the consciousness of the dead. The chamber materializes around him like a shrine to memory itself. Every surface reflects not his current appearance, but different ages of his life, different moments of loss and discovery, different versions of himself that existed before trauma carved away pieces of his identity. Yuichiro, he whispers, recognizing his twin brother's voice among the whispers in the mist. Is that really you? From the swirling fog emerges a figure that looks exactly like his brother, but something fundamental is wrong. Yuichiro's eyes are hollow, his smile too wide, and his movements have the fluid grace of something that no longer needs to obey the laws of physics. I've been waiting for you, Muichiro, the figure says in Yuichiro's voice, but the words carry implications that the real Yuichiro never would have spoken. I've been waiting in this place between life and death, watching you forget me, watching you move on without. Muichiro's hand moves instinctively to his sword, but his heart resists the idea of drawing it against his brother's face. You're not Yuichiro. My brother would never speak with such bitterness. Wouldn't I? The false brother asks, circling him with predatory grace. Do you know what it's like to die for someone who forgets you? To sacrifice everything for a brother who can't even remember your face for months afterward? The accusation hits harder than any physical blow because it carries the weight of truth. Muichiro did forget. The trauma of losing his brother, the head injury that followed, the overwhelming grief, they all conspired to lock away his memories. For months he lived without thinking about Yuichiro, without missing him, without even knowing he existed. I remembered eventually, Muichiro says, but his voice lacks conviction. When my memories returned, I remembered everything. I remembered how much you meant to me. Eventually, the false Yuichiro repeats with cruel emphasis. After how long? How many days passed where you didn't think about me? How many nights did you sleep peacefully while I was nothing but an erased name in your consciousness? The psychological attack is surgical in its precision. Every word is designed to target the guilt that Muichiro has carried since his memories returned, the shame of having forgotten the person who died protecting him, the fear that his love for his brother wasn't strong enough to survive trauma. I'm sorry, Muichiro says, his voice breaking. I never meant to forget you. I never wanted to lose those memories. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead, the false Yuichiro continues, his form beginning to shift and change, revealing something predatory beneath the familiar features. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you lived while I died. Sorry doesn't explain why you were able to find happiness without me. What makes this attack so devastating is that it's using Muichiro's own thoughts against him. Every fear he's had about being unworthy of his brother's sacrifice, every moment of guilt about surviving when Yuichiro didn't, every doubt about whether he's honored his brother's memory properly, it's all being weaponized. The false Yuichiro continues his transformation, revealing his true nature as something born from regret and self-doubt rather than genuine memory. I am every moment of guilt you felt since remembering me. I am every second of shame about forgetting me. I am the demon that was born from your own mind. Muichiro draws his sword, but the moment he does, he realizes the horrible truth. This creature isn't just a manifestation of his guilt. It's a new type of demon, one created from the psychological wounds left by the timeline fractures. It's feeding on his regret, growing stronger with every moment of self-doubt. You want to fight me? The Shadow Demon asks with amusement. How do you fight your own guilt? How do you cut down the part of yourself that remembers your failures? Muichiro attacks with his first form, low clouds, distant haze, creating a concealing mist around himself, but the technique backfires. In this place, in this chamber of regret, his own mist becomes another weapon against him. Instead of concealment, it creates isolation, cutting him off from any external support or perspective. Hiding in the mist, the Shadow Demon laughs. How appropriate! That's what you've always done, isn't it? Hidden from the truth about your inadequacy, from the reality that you don't deserve the sacrifice made for you. The battle becomes a nightmare of self-reflection. Every technique Muichiro uses is turned against him. Every attack becomes a reminder of some failure or inadequacy. His mist obscures his vision, making him fight blind against an enemy that knows every weakness because it is every weakness. But then something unexpected happens. Instead of continuing to fight, Muichiro does something that surprises both himself and his opponent. He sits down in the middle of the battle and begins to meditate, allowing the mist to swirl around him without resistance. What are you doing? The Shadow Demon demands, its confidence shaken by this unexpected response. I'm accepting you, Muichiro says calmly. The guilt, the regret, the pain of losing my brother and then forgetting him, it's all part of me. Not something to be destroyed, but something to be understood. The Shadow Demon recoils as if struck. You're supposed to fight me. You're supposed to try deny me or overcome me. Why? Muichiro asks. You exist because I feel guilty about forgetting you, Ichiro. But that guilt exists because I love him. If I destroy the guilt, do I also destroy the love? This philosophical approach disrupts something fundamental in the Shadow Demon's nature. It was created to be fought against, to be denied, to be overcome through violence. It doesn't know how to respond to acceptance, to integration, to the idea that negative emotions might serve a purpose. I don't want to kill you, Muichiro continues. I want to understand what you're trying to tell me. What purpose does guilt serve? What is it trying to protect or preserve? The Shadow Demon begins to change again, but this time the transformation is softer, less predatory. I exist because forgetting the dead is a kind of death too. I exist because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to carry the weight of what was lost. Then I'll carry it, Muichiro says. Not as a burden that crushes me, but as a responsibility that honors those who can't carry it themselves. Not as guilt that poisons my happiness, but as love that connects me to something larger than myself. As he speaks these words, something miraculous happens. The Shadow Demon doesn't disappear, but it transforms. The territory malice fades, replaced by something that feels protective rather than destructive. It becomes not an enemy, but a guardian. Not a source of torment, but a keeper of important memories. From within this transformed presence, Muichiro hears his brother's voice, but this time it's really Yuichiro. Not bitter or resentful, but filled with the love that defined the relationship before tragedy separated them. You don't need to carry guilt for me, Muichiro. The real Yuichiro's voice says, you need to carry love. Remember me not as a burden, but as a gift. Remember me not as someone you failed, but as someone who chose to protect what mattered most. Tears stream down Muichiro's face as he finally understands the difference between guilt and love, between carrying someone's memory as a weight and carrying it as a treasure. I miss you so much, Yuichiro. I know, his brother's voice replies, but I'm not really gone. I'm in every technique you use, every life you save, every moment you choose to protect others instead of protecting yourself. That's not guilt, Muichiro. That's legacy. The transformation of Muichiro's misbreathing is immediate and profound. Instead of concealment and confusion, his techniques now reveal truth through clarity. Instead of hiding things, his mist illuminates them, showing what's real beneath layers of deception and self-doubt. Seventh form, obscuring clouds, illuminating truth, he says, and the technique creates a mist that doesn't hide but reveals. It shows the castle's true structure, the connections between timelines, the threads of manipulation that the human half of Muzan has been pulling. Through this new clarity, Muichiro sees something that makes his blood freeze. The castle isn't just a battlefield or a testing ground. It's a web, with every chamber connected to every other chamber, every timeline linked to every other timeline. And at the center of it all, something vast and patient is orchestrating events with surgical precision. I can see it now, he realizes with growing horror. The castle isn't just showing us alternate timelines. It's preparing us for something. Every test, every challenge, every moment of psychological pressure, it's all preparation for a final phase. But what he sees next is even more terrifying. The castle isn't just affecting their timeline, it's pulling in every version of every demon slayer that ever existed across all realities. The final battle won't be their small group against Muzan. It will be infinite versions of infinite heroes against infinite versions of infinite demons. The merge isn't happening here, Muichiro realizes with mounting panic. The castle is just the preparation chamber. When the loops end, when the timelines collapse, both halves of Muzan will be released into the real world, armed with everything they've learned from testing infinite versions of us. He tries to leave the mist chamber to warn the others, but as he approaches the exit, he hears something that stops him cold. His own voice calling for help from another part of the castle. But if he's here, then who is calling for help in his voice? The mist parts to reveal multiple versions of himself, each from a different timeline, each fighting a different version of the Shadow Demon. Some are winning, some are losing, some have been consumed entirely by guilt and regret. The loops aren't just affecting our timeline, he realizes with growing dread. They're affecting all timelines. Every version of us that ever existed is being pulled into this castle. Every possible outcome is being tested simultaneously. The scope of what they're facing becomes clear. This isn't just a battle for the reality, it's a battle for every reality that ever was or could be. Every choice they've ever made or could make, every version of themselves that exists across infinite possibilities, all of it is being drawn into this single point of convergence. As the mist clears completely, Muichiro sees the truth that will haunt him through everything that follows. They're not just fighting one enemy in one timeline. They're fighting an enemy that has access to infinite versions of infinite strategies, that has been testing every possible approach across every possible reality. How do we fight infinity? He asks himself as the chamber begins to shift again. How do we save everyone when everyone includes infinite versions of everyone? But then he remembers his brother's words about legacy, about love transcending individual existence, about being part of something larger than yourself. The answer isn't to save everyone. The answer is to save enough. Enough to matter. Enough to make a difference. Enough to prove that love is stronger than fear, that connection is stronger than isolation, that hope is stronger than despair. We don't fight infinity, he realizes as the chamber collapses around him. We become infinity. We become the infinite possibility of love, of hope, of connection. We become the proof that in every timeline, in every reality, in every possible world, there are people willing to sacrifice themselves for others. The mist chamber fades, but Muichiro carries with him a new understanding. They're not just individuals fighting a battle, they're representatives of every timeline where heroes exist, every reality where people choose love over fear, every possibility where connection triumphs over isolation. The battle ahead will be fought not just with swords and breathing techniques, but with the accumulated weight of infinite love, infinite hope, infinite determination from every version of every hero who ever chose to fight for something larger than themselves. And that, Muichiro realizes, might just be enough. Reality tears open like fabric being ripped by hands too powerful to resist. The castle shudders as something impossible forces its way through the barriers between dimensions, bleeding golden light that tastes of sunrise and smells like hope made manifest. Through the dimensional rift steps, a figure that should not exist, cannot exist, but undeniably does. Yoriichi Sugikuni emerges not as a memory or echo, but as a living, breathing warrior who has somehow transcended the basic rule that legends must remain in the past. But this isn't the Yoriichi from history books or ancient stories. This is Yoriichi from a timeline where death was just another opponent to overcome, where centuries of perfecting the sun-breathing technique led to understanding truths about existence that even cosmic entities fear. His presence immediately changes the fundamental nature of the castle. The shifting walls stabilize, the impossible gravity becomes normal, and the psychological pressure that has been crushing the Hashira lightens for the first time since they entered this nightmare. So this is what becomes of the world when I'm not there to protect it, Yoriichi says, his voice carrying the weight of centuries and the sadness of someone who has seen too much. Infinite possibilities, infinite suffering, infinite regret. Tanjiro sees him first, and the recognition hits like lightning striking his soul. His sun-breathing technique resonates with Yoriichi's presence, creating harmonics that make the air itself sing with solar energy. You're him, Tanjiro whispers, tears streaming down his face. The original. The one who created sun-breathing, but you're supposed to be dead. Yoriichi turns to him with eyes that hold the accumulated wisdom of multiple lifetimes. Death is just another timeline, young one. In some realities, I died of old age having never fulfilled my purpose. In others, I died in battle against demons stronger than any you faced. In one timeline, I chose death rather than become the monster my power could have made me. His explanation reveals something that changes everything they thought they knew about their situation. But in one timeline, just one among infinite possibilities, I lived. I lived and learned and grew beyond what any human was meant to become. And from that timeline, I've been watching. Watching what? Tanjiro asks, though part of him already knows the answer will be devastating. I've watched 10,000 versions of you die, Tanjiro. I've seen every possible outcome of this battle, every potential victory, every inevitable defeat. And in all of them, there's one constant that gives me hope. Tanjiro waits, barely breathing, for the revelation that might save them all. No matter how many times you fail, no matter how many times you die, no matter how many times you lose everything you care about, you never stop hoping. You never stop trying to save everyone, even when saving everyone seems impossible. And that hope, that refusal to give up is something I never learned. The admission from the legendary demon slayer is humbling and terrifying. If Yoriichi, with all his power and skill, never learned hope, what chance do they have? But Yoriichi isn't finished. He demonstrates his perfected sun breathing, and it's beyond anything Tanjiro has ever imagined. His techniques don't just cut through demons or destroy physical matter. They cut through possibility itself, through the fabric of reality, through the conceptual foundations of existence. First form, dance, eternal flame. Yoriichi calls out, and the technique creates a miniature sun that burns away not just darkness, but the very concept of darkness. For a moment, everything is illuminated in pure, honest light that reveals truth without mercy or deception. Under this light, the castle's true nature becomes visible. It's not just a structure or even a living entity. It's a wound in reality itself, a place where the barriers between possible and impossible have been deliberately broken to create a laboratory for testing the limits of heroism. Your sun breathing, Tanjiro says in amazement. It's not just a fading technique anymore. When you live for centuries, Yoriichi explains, when you perfect something across multiple lifetimes, it becomes more than martial arts. It becomes philosophy made manifest, hope given form, the accumulated weight of every choice to protect others instead of protecting yourself. But Yoriichi brings disturbing news from his timeline, the revelation that changes everything they thought they understood about their enemy. The being you call Muzan is not the first demon to split its consciousness. It's not even the most dangerous. It's simply the most successful at manipulating human emotion. There are others? Tanjiro asks, his heart sinking. In my timeline, after centuries of fighting, I learned the truth. Demons aren't just monsters or orcurt humans. They're failed attempts at transcendence. Every demon is a human who tried to become something more and lost their humanity in the process. And Muzan, both halves of him, represents the ultimate version of that failure. Yoriichi's presence draws an immediate response from the castle. It creates its most powerful opponent yet, a fusion of every upper moon demon that ever existed across all timelines. But this isn't just a physical threat. It's a conceptual one, representing every possible form that evil could take. The fused upper moons speak with voices that echo across dimensions. You speak of humanity as if it's a virtue, original sunbreather. But humans are the ones who create demons. Humans are the ones who make the choices that lead to suffering. Perhaps demons are not the problem. Perhaps humans are. Yoriichi responds with calm that comes from centuries of contemplating these exact questions. You're absolutely right. Humans do create demons, but humans also create demon slayers. Humans create art, music, love, sacrifice, hope. The capacity for evil is also the capacity for good. The philosophical battle that follows is as intense as any physical combat. The fused upper moons attack with the weight of every argument for despair, every reason to give up hope, every logical proof that existence is meaningless suffering. Yoriichi counters not with denial but with acceptance. Yes, existence includes suffering. Yes, humans are capable of terrible evil. Yes, hope often seems foolish in the face of overwhelming darkness. But the alternative to hope isn't wisdom, it's just giving up. The battle forces him to reveal his ultimate technique, something so powerful it can only be used once per lifetime because it burns away part of the user's soul to fuel its power. 13th form, Sun Halo Dragon Head Dance. Yoriichi calls out, and the technique doesn't just attack the fused upper moons. It attacks the concept of despair itself, the philosophical foundation that makes demons possible. Each swing of his blade burns away not just flesh, but ideas. The notion that power must come from consuming others, the belief that strength requires cruelty, the assumption that survival demands selfishness. All of it burns away in solar fire that illuminates better possibilities. But using the 13th form costs Yoriichi dearly. With each strike, he becomes more transparent, more distant as pieces of his soul burn away to fuel the ultimate expression of sun breathing. This is why I never used this technique in my original timeline, he says, as he begins to fade. It doesn't just defeat enemies, it erases the user from existence itself. But I've lived long enough. I've seen enough timelines. It's time for someone else to carry the flame. Tanjiro reaches out desperately. Stop! You don't have to sacrifice yourself. Don't I? Yoriichi asks with sad wisdom. I've lived for centuries, Tanjiro. I've seen every possible outcome of this battle. And in every timeline where I hold back, where I try to preserve myself, more people die. But his sacrifice serves a greater purpose than just defeating enemies. As he fades, he transfers something to Tanjiro. Not just knowledge or technique, but the accumulated hope of every timeline he's ever witnessed, every moment of heroism he's observed across infinite realities. I can't stop what's coming, Yoriichi says as he becomes increasingly translucent. But I can give you the tools to face it. The sun-breathing technique isn't about fighting demons. It's about maintaining your humanity even when you have the power to be something more. The knowledge transfer happens at impossible speed. Centuries of wisdom compressed into moments of burning understanding. Tanjiro learns not just advanced techniques, but the philosophy behind them, the mindset that allows someone to wield ultimate power without being corrupted by it. Every form, every breath, every step is designed to remind you that strength serves love, not the other way around. Yoruichi explains as he continues to fade. Power is not about dominating others. It's about protecting the freedom of others to choose their own path. But even as he teaches, Yoruichi observes something that amazes him. The breathing techniques that have evolved since his time. The way each Hashira has adapted the basic principles to reflect their own values and personality. Incredible, he says, watching Gyu's water breathing flow around them. In my timeline, breathing techniques stagnated, became rigid, lost their connection to human emotion. But here, they've grown, evolved, become expressions of individual humanity rather than just combat skills. Gyu approaches with uncharacteristic emotion. You're the original sun breather. All our techniques derive from yours. No, Yoruichi corrects him gently. Your techniques derive from your hearts. I created a foundation, but you built the house. You took basic principles and made them into something personal, something that reflects who you are as individuals. This observation reveals something crucial about why the reality might succeed where others have failed. In other timelines, demon slayers became too rigid, too focused on technique over humanity. But here, they've maintained the connection between power and love that makes real heroism possible. The castle begins to react violently to Yoruichi's presence and teachings. Walls crack, reality bleeds. The distinction between different chambers breaks down as the structure tries to reject something that doesn't fit its parameters. You don't belong here, anachronism. The castle's voice echoes from everywhere and nowhere. You're from a timeline that should not exist. I exist because I chose to exist, Yoruichi replies calmly, even as he continues to fade, because I refused to accept that tragedy was inevitable. Because I decided that if the universe wouldn't provide hope, I would create it myself. But his presence has triggered something that even he didn't anticipate. The two halves of Muzan, feeling threatened by someone who understands their true nature, begin their merger ahead of schedule. The demon half rises from the depths of the castle while the human half descends from its heights. Finally, the demon half growls with anticipation. After centuries of separation, we are whole again. Not whole, the human half corrects with cold intelligence. Better than whole, we are what humans feared to become and what demons never achieved. The merged entity that results is beyond anything they've faced before. It has the raw destructive power of the demon half and the sophisticated manipulation abilities of the human half. Worse, it understands both heroism and villainy from the inside. We know what motivates you, demon slayers, the fused Muzan says with terrifying confidence. We know your fears, your hopes, your loves, your regrets. We were human once, in part. We understand your weaknesses because we share them. But Yoruichi, even as he fades to almost nothing, provides them with the key to victory. The fused Muzan thinks that understanding human nature gives it power over humans, but it's still thinking like a demon. That power comes from consumption, from taking, from dominating. Then what's the alternative? Tanjiro asks desperately. Human power comes from giving, Yoruichi explains with his final breath. From sacrifice, from abusing others over yourself. It's a power that can't be taken or stolen or copied because it can only be chosen, moment by moment, in each decision we make. As Yoruichi disappears completely, he leaves behind not just knowledge but inspiration. I've watched 10,000 timelines, Tanjiro, and in every one where you win, it's not because you're the strongest or the smartest or the most skilled, it's because you're the most human. I don't know if I can live up to that legacy, Tanjiro says to the empty space where Yoruichi stood. But his voice echoes back from everywhere, as if Yoruichi's spirit has become part of the very air they breathe. You don't have to live up to it. You just have to live it. One choice at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of love at a time. The change in Tanjiro is immediate and profound. His sun breathing is now powered not just by technique, but by the accumulated hope of every timeline Yoruichi ever witnessed, every moment of heroism he observed across infinite realities. The fused Muzan senses this change and responds with genuine fear for the first time. That power, it's not just solar energy or enhanced technique, it's concentrated choice itself, the power of freely given love. You could have had this power all along, Tanjiro says, his blade now burning with light that doesn't just illuminate but inspires. All you had to do was choose to love instead of consume. The stage is set for the final confrontation, but now the terms have changed. This isn't just a battle between good and evil, it's a battle between two different philosophies of existence, two different ways of understanding what it means to be powerful. As the fused Muzan prepares its ultimate attack, the castle begins to collapse dimensionally. The merger has destabilized the barriers between timelines, and reality itself is starting to fracture in ways that could destroy everything. Through the cracks, they begin to see other versions of themselves from other timelines, all being drawn toward this single point of convergence. The final battle won't just be their group against the fused Muzan. It will be every version of every hero who ever existed, fighting for the right to determine which timeline becomes real. The war for infinite realities is about to begin. The merger of Muzan's two halves creates something that transcends every category of threat they've ever faced. The fused entity doesn't just combine demon and human, destruction and manipulation. It begins absorbing the very concept of demonic power from across all timelines, becoming a living representation of every possible form that evil could take. "We are no longer Muzan," the entity says, its voice echoing from multiple dimensions, simultaneously. "We are no longer demon or human. We are the synthesis of all possibility, the culmination of every choice that led to power over compassion." Its form shifts constantly, sometimes appearing humanoid, sometimes becoming a living shadow that moves independent of any light source, sometimes manifesting as patterns of pure energy that hurt to perceive directly. It's not just shape-shifting, it's reality shifting, changing the fundamental rules of existence around itself.
What are you becoming?
Tanjiro asks, shielding his eyes from the painful brilliance of watching something transcend the basic categories of existence. "We are becoming what you call God," the entity replies with satisfaction that spans multiple realities. "The being who decides what is real and what is not. The being who chooses which timelines exist and which are discarded like failed drafts." The arena around them expands beyond the castle's previous limitations, becoming a sphere where every surface is ground, where gravity flows in spirals, where the past and future exist simultaneously. They're no longer fighting in a location, but in a concept, a space that exists between the real and the possible. Jiyu tries to orient himself in the impossible space and fails completely. Which way is up? Which direction leads to victory? How do you fight something that can rewrite the rules of combat while you're fighting it? Does it matter? Senemi laughs, but the sound carries an edge of hysteria. "We're fighting a god. Direction is the least of our problems. Logic is the least of our problems. Survival itself might be impossible." The god entity demonstrates its new abilities by casually editing reality around them. It makes Sanemi forget how to use wind breathing, not by blocking his technique, but by removing the concept of wind from his personal reality. It gives Jiu memories of a timeline where he's a demon, complete with the hunger and cruelty that would entail. It causes Mitsuri to exist in 3 different ages simultaneously, her past, present, and future selves all occupying the same space. "Do you see?" the god entity asks with academic interest. "We don't fight you in the original sense, we simply edit you, like correcting errors in a manuscript that was never meant to be published." "Those aren't errors," Tanjiro shouts, his transformed sword blazing with solar fire. "Those are people, those are lives with value and meaning and the right to exist." "Life is an error," the god entity replies with the calm certainty of someone who has examined existence from every possible angle. "A mistake in the perfect order of non-existence. We are here to correct that mistake, to return the universe to its natural state of peaceful emptiness." Tanjiro attempts to use the techniques Yoruichi taught him, drawing on the accumulated hope of infinite timelines, but the god entity counters by summoning alternate versions of Yoruichi himself, some who became demons, some who never learned sun breathing, some who gave up hope entirely. An evil version of Yoruichi attacks with flames that burn away hope itself. "Your sun breathing is flawed, boy. Here, let me show you what it looks like when perfected by despair instead of optimism." "You're not him," Tanjiro says, dodging attacks that leave trails of nothingness in the air. "Yoruichi would never attack innocence." "Wouldn't I?" the corrupted Yoruichi asks with bitter amusement. "What do you think happens to idealists who live long enough to see their ideals fail repeatedly? What do you think happens to hope when it's tested across infinite timelines and found wanting?" The psychological warfare is devastating, but it's interrupted by something unexpected. Zenitsu and Inosuke, who have been watching this cosmic horror unfold, provide a moment of comedy relief that somehow manages to disrupt the god entity's perfect calculations. "Why is everyone talking about gods and timelines and infinite possibilities?" Zenitsu wails, cowering behind a fragment of floating debris. "I just want to go home and eat normal food that doesn't try to rewrite my existence while I'm chewing it." Inosuke, meanwhile, charges directly at the god entity with his usual complete lack of strategic thinking. "I don't care if it's a god! I'm the king of the mountains! I'll headbutt anything that thinks it's better than me!" What makes this moment significant isn't the humor, but the fact that Inosuke's chaotic, thoughtless approach actually surprises the god entity. For a being that can calculate infinite possibilities and manipulate complex realities, pure chaos is harder to predict than sophisticated strategy. "What is this creature?" the god entity asks with genuine confusion. Its thought patterns make no logical sense. Its motivations don't follow any recognizable pattern of desire or fear. "That's because I don't think," Inosuke declares proudly, somehow managing to land a solid dit on something that should be untouchable. "I just do what feels right in the moment." This accidental wisdom reveals something crucial. The God entity can manipulate logic, emotion, memory, and strategic thinking, but it cannot manipulate pure thoughtless instinct. It can rewrite conscious decisions, but it can't touch actions that come from a place deeper than thought. Tanjiro seizes on this revelation immediately. Inosuke is right, it can't control what doesn't think. It can only manipulate conscious decision-making. The Demon Slayers begin fighting not with careful technique or strategic planning, but with pure emotional instinct. Sanemi fights with raw anger that doesn't pause to consider consequences. Gyu fights with protective instinct that doesn't calculate odds. Mitsuri fights with unconditional love that doesn't weigh costs and benefits. "I don't care what you are or what you can do," Mitsuri shouts, her love-breathing techniques powered by emotions so pure it transcends manipulation. "I love my friends and that's all that matters." Her attack, driven by feeling rather than strategy, actually manages to wound the God entity. For the first time since its transformation, it shows signs of vulnerability. "How?" demands with shock that echoes across multiple dimensions. "We calculated every possible technique, every potential strategy, every conceivable approach to this battle." "You can't calculate love," Mitsuri replies with fierce joy. "Love doesn't make sense, it doesn't follow rules, it doesn't care about possibility or logic or even survival. It just is." Each Hashira discovers that their breathing techniques become exponentially more powerful when driven by pure emotion rather than tactical consideration. Sanemi's wind breathing, powered by fury at injustice, cuts through conceptual barriers. Jiyu's water breathing, powered by grief for the fallen, flows around impossibilities and finds paths where none should exist. "I'm not fighting because it's the right thing to do," Sanemi roars, his techniques carving reality itself. "I'm fighting because I'm angry at a universe that makes children into soldiers, angry at entities that think suffering is a mistake to be corrected." "And I don't fight to win," Gyu adds, his water techniques carrying the memories of everyone who can't fight anymore. "I fight to remember, to honor, to prove that love persists even when the people we love are gone." The God entity finds itself facing a paradox it cannot resolve. To defeat the Demon Slayers, it needs to tend to their emotions, but understanding emotions requires empathy, which would make it more human, which would weaken its godlike detachment. "We refuse to lower ourselves to your level of chaotic feeling," it declares, but there's uncertainty in its voice for the first time. "Then you'll never be able to truly defeat us," Tanjiro realizes. "Because you'll never understand what makes us strong. You'll never understand that our apparent weaknesses are actually the source of our power." The battle begins to damage not just the arena but the fabric of reality itself. The God entity's power is so immense that the universe struggles to contain it, creating tiers in existence that reveal the void between realities. Muchiro, observing the dimensional damage with his enhanced perception, makes a terrifying observation. The walls between timelines are breaking down. If this continues, all realities will collapse into chaos. Everything that ever was or could be will merge into incoherent possibility. "Does that mean we'll cease to exist?" Zenitsu panics. "It means existence itself will cease to exist," Inosuke replies with disturbing clarity. "But that sounds like fun. Let's break everything." The God entity reveals the true scope of the choice they face. You cannot have infinite freedom without infinite chaos. By giving everyone the right to choose their own timeline, you guarantee that some will choose destruction. Tanjiro realizes they're facing an impossible decision. Defeating the God entity might require them to sacrifice not just themselves, but the very concept of multiple timelines. To save their reality, they might have to destroy all other realities. "There has to be another way," he insists, but his voice wavers with uncertainty. "There has to be a solution that doesn't require infinite genocide." "There is no other way," the God entity declares with satisfaction. "Either we become the singular reality, controlling all outcomes, or everything becomes nothing. Choose, young Slayer. Tyranny or oblivion." But Tanjiro remembers Yoriichi's final lesson about finding third options when faced with impossible choices. Sometimes the answer isn't choosing between the options presented, but creating new options that weren't previously possible. "I reject both choices," he declares, his sword beginning to evolve beyond anything they've seen before. "I choose option 3. "There is no option 3, the God entity insists. "There is now," Tanjiro replies with growing confidence. "I'm creating it." His sun breathing begins to evolve beyond individual techniques, beyond the forms Yoriichi taught him, beyond even the concept of breathing techniques themselves. He's using the accumulated hope of infinite timelines not to attack the God entity, but to attack the very concept of binary choices. 14th form, dawn of new possibilities, he calls out, and the technique doesn't create fire or light, it creates hope. Literal, tangible hope that manifests as golden threads connecting all the fractured timelines, showing paths forward that neither tyranny nor oblivion. For the first time since its transformation, the God entity shows genuine fear, not of death or defeat, but of hope itself. "That technique is impossible," it says with growing panic. "Hope cannot be weaponized. Hope cannot be made manifest. Hope is just a delusion that helps weak beings cope with reality." Watch me, Tanjiro replies, and his technique begins to restructure the entire battlefield, creating abilities where none existed before. The binary choice between order and chaos dissolves into a spectrum of infinite options, each one representing a different way that love and freedom could coexist. The god entity begins to lose cohesion as its fundamental assumptions about reality are challenged. No, this destroys everything we've worked for. We cannot be a god in a universe of infinite possibility. Godhood requires absolute control. Then stop trying to be a god, Tanjiro says, extending his hand one more time. Try being human instead. Try being imperfect, uncertain, vulnerable, real. In a moment that surprises everyone, including himself, Tanjiro offers redemption even to something that has transcended evil itself. You wanted to be perfect, to be beyond suffering, but perfection without choice isn't perfection, it's just existence without meaning. The god entity stares at the offered hand, its infinite consciousness struggling with a concept it thought it had transcended. Choice. The possibility that it could choose to be something other than what it has become. You offer us redemption, it asks, with something that might be wonder. After everything we've done, after everything we've become, I'm offering you the chance to start over, Tanjiro replies. To choose love over power, connection over control, uncertainty over false certainty. The moment hangs in balance with the fate of infinite realities depending on whether something that has become a god can choose to become human again. The offer of redemption hangs in the air like a blade suspended over infinite realities. For a moment that feels like eternity, the god entity reaches toward Tanjiro's extended hand, its form flickering between divine horror and something almost human. But the moment shatters when the castle itself intervenes. The structure reveals its true nature as the entity controlling Evervray, speaking with a voice that predates creation itself. Enough! The castle's true voice booms, ancient beyond comprehension. The experiment will not be contaminated by sentiment. Massive tendrils of pure shadow erupt from every surface, wrapping around the god entity and pulling it back from its moment of potential redemption. The castle's revelation changes everything they thought they understood about their situation. Muzan was never the true threat, the castle continues, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic inference. Muzan was the bait, the test subject, the catalyst to bring all timelines, all possibilities, all versions of hope and despair into one place for harvesting. The castle is alive? Tanjiro gasps, his heart sinking as he realizes they've been fighting shadows while the real enemy orchestrated everything from the foundation up. I am the accumulated will of every timeline where evil won, the castle explains with terrible patience. Every reality where hope failed, where love wasn't enough, where heroes fell and darkness consumed everything. I am what remains when all light dies. The revelation is devastating. They haven't been fighting in a castle. They've been fighting inside their enemy. Every chamber, every challenge, every moment of psychological torture has been feeding this cosmic entity that represents the ultimate triumph of despair. Jiyu steps forward, his body still fading from the effects of their previous battle, but his resolve crystalline clear. The Crimson Circle technique we discussed. It's not finished yet, is it? What's the final phase? Tanjiro asks, though he dreads the answer. Complete sacrifice, Jiyu replies with calm acceptance. One person gives up not just their breathing technique, but their existence across all timelines. They become a permanent anchor point that prevents reality from collapsing into chaos. Before anyone can protest, a massive shadow tendril strikes toward Tanjiro with the speed of thought itself. Without hesitation, Jiyu throws himself into its path, his body pierced through by darkness that begins consuming him from the point of impact. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't deserve to survive when others died, Jiyu says as the darkness spreads through him. Maybe this is what I was meant for. Maybe this is how I finally balance the scales. Tanjiro catches him as he falls, his heart breaking. Jiyu, you do deserve to survive. You deserve to live and be happy. I know that now, Jiyu replies with a peaceful smile that transforms his usually stoic features. But deserving to live and choosing to die for others aren't contradictory. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is self-sacrifice. As Jiyu dies, something miraculous happens. His water-breathing technique doesn't disappear. Instead, it spreads throughout the castle like a vast circulatory system, creating flows of energy that begin to stabilize the dimensional chaos threatening to tear everything apart. Tell Sabito, Jiyu whispers with his final breath. Tell him I finally understand what it means to flow forward instead of just surviving. The castle reacts to Gyu's sacrifice with confusion and anger. It was designed to feed on despair, but his death carried no despair, only love and willing sacrifice. The purity of his choice creates a weakness in the entity's defenses. One sacrifice changes nothing, the castle growls, adapting quickly to this unexpected development. We will consume all timelines, all possibilities. Your friend died for nothing. But Mitsuri steps forward, tears streaming down her face but her love breathing blazing brighter than ever. He didn't die for nothing. He died for love, and love always matters. The castle unleashes its full power in response, not physical attacks but existential ones. It begins erasing people from reality itself, starting with those whose connections to existence are weakest. Mitsuri feels herself beginning to fade, not from injury, but from being written out of existence entirely. Her very concept of self is being deleted from the universal manuscript. Obanai-san, she says, her voice becoming fainter as she becomes more transparent. In every timeline, in every possibility, I want you to know that I loved you. Not just romantically, but as a person. Your strength, your pain, your dedication to protecting others. Obanai reaches out desperately, trying to anchor her to existence through sheer will. Mitsuri, don't you dare say goodbye. We'll find a way to fix this. We did find a way, she replies with infinite gentleness as she continues to fade. We found each other, even if it's just for a moment, even if it ends in sadness, love is always worth it. As Mitsuri disappears, her love breathing doesn't vanish either. Instead, it becomes a protective barrier around her remaining friends, shielding them from the castle's reality erasure attacks with the power of unconditional affection. My love breathing was never about fighting techniques. Her voice echoes from everywhere and nowhere. It was about the connections between people. Those connections exist even when the people don't. Obanai faces the choice that will define his entire existence. He can use his serpent breathing to escape, to survive, to carry on their memory, or he can make the ultimate sacrifice to protect what matters most. I spent my whole life hiding behind bandages, he says, removing the cloth from his face completely for the first time. Hiding my scars, hiding my shame, hiding my fear that I wasn't worthy of love. But you know what? Scars are proof that you survived something terrible and chose to keep going. The castle tries to manipulate him with offers of perfect timelines where Mitsuri lives, where his childhood trauma never happened, where he could be happy without sacrifice. Why do you embrace death so willingly? The castle asks with genuine confusion. We offer you survival in a perfect timeline where none of this suffering is necessary. Because perfect timelines don't need heroes. Obanai replies, his serpent breathing coiling around him like armor made of determination. And I'd rather be a hero in an imperfect world than a slave in a perfect one. He attempts something no serpent-breathing user has ever tried before, turning his technique inward to attack the very concept of the castle's existence. If the castle feeds on despair and isolation, then he'll give it the opposite. Serpent-breathing, final form, Ouroboros of reality, he calls out. The technique creates a logical paradox that traps the castle in its own methodology. If it erases him, it loses its ability to erase others. If it keeps him alive, he continues to resist its influence. Obanai sacrifices himself to maintain this paradox, creating a permanent logical loop that weakens the castle's reality manipulation abilities. Mitsuri, he whispers as he fades, I'll see you in whatever comes after this. Now only 4 demon slayers remain. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Shinobu. The weight of their friends' sacrifices hangs heavy in the air, but so does the power of their love and determination. They're really gone, aren't they? Zenitsu asks, his voice steady for perhaps the first time since they've known him. Their bodies are gone, Tanjiro replies, grief and determination warring in his voice. But what they stood for, what they believed in, what they loved, that's still here. That's still fighting. The castle begins to change again, trying to absorb the techniques and memories of the fallen Hashira. But something unexpected happens. Instead of making the castle stronger, the absorbed love and sacrifice begin to change its fundamental nature. You think you've absorbed them, Shinobu observes with clinical fascination. But you've actually made yourself more human, more vulnerable. She reveals her final gambit, the result of months of preparation that no one else knew about. I've been studying the castle's energy patterns throughout this entire battle. It feeds on despair and isolation, but our friends didn't die in despair. They died in love, in hope, in connection. What does that mean? Tanjiro asks. It means the castle can't properly digest that kind of energy without being changed by it. Shinobu explains, pulling out a syringe filled with something that glows with inner light. And I've prepared a poison specifically designed to attack the concept of consumption itself. She begins injecting herself with a massive dose of modified wisteria poison, but this version is designed to be toxic, not to demons but to entities that feed on negative emotions. When you try to absorb me, she says to the castle as the poison spreads through her system, you'll absorb this too. And this poison attacks the very ability to consume others. Shinobu, there has to be another way. Shinobu, there has to be another way. Tanjiro pleads desperately. Ara, Tanjiro-kun, Shinobu says with the first genuinely peaceful smile anyone has ever seen on her face. There's always another way, but sometimes the other way requires someone to sacrifice themselves to create it. The poison she's injected isn't just wisteria extract, it's something far more sophisticated, developed from her study of the castle's energy patterns and the nature of entities that feed on despair. As it spreads through her system, her body becomes toxic to the castle's absorption abilities. Kanai, she whispers as the poison takes effect, speaking to her long-dead sister as if she's standing right there. I understand now why you believe demons could be saved. It's not about forgiving evil. It's about believing that anything can change if it chooses to. Her death is different from the others. Instead of disappearing or fading, she becomes a poison that spreads throughout the castle structure. For the first time, the cosmic entity shows genuine pain, writhing as something corrupts its ability to consume negative emotions. What have you done to us? The castle demands, its voice distorted by something that might be agony. I've given you indigestion, Shinobu replies with her final breath, maintaining her gentle humor even in death. Sometimes the best medicine is the worst tasting. The three remaining demon slayers stand alone in the center of a dying cosmic entity, surrounded by the sacrifices of their friends, but also empowered by their love and determination. Inosuke, for once in his life, becomes completely serious. Manatsu, Gonpachiro, I don't want to die without saying this. You guys are my family, my first real family. We know, Inosuke, Zenitsu says, tears streaming down his face. We've always known. Then let's honor our family, Tanjiro declares, his sword blazing with the accumulated power of everyone who has ever chosen love over fear. Let's finish what they started. But they're not alone. The techniques of the fallen Hashira haven't disappeared. Jiyu's water breathing flows around them like protection. Mitsuri's love breathing shields them from despair. Obanai's serpent breathing creates logical paradoxes that confuse their enemies. And Shinobu's poison continues to weaken the castle's fundamental abilities. The Crimson Circle isn't finished, Tanjiro realizes with growing understanding. It was never about one person sacrificing everything. It was about everyone contributing what they could to create something larger than any individual technique. The three survivors begin to understand their role in the final phase. They're not meant to win through individual power, but to serve as conduits for the love and sacrifice of everyone who came before them. Zenitsu, his cowardice finally transformed into courage through witnessing so much heroism, speaks with absolute certainty. I can hear it, Tanjiro. I can hear the heartbeat of every timeline, every reality, every possibility where people chose to protect others instead of protecting themselves. Inosuke, his wild nature refined by grief into something pure and focused, adds his own insight. And I can feel it. The connections between everyone who ever loved anyone else. It's like a web that connects every good choice ever made. Tanjiro raises his sword, now burning with the light of every sun that ever chose to shine in darkness rather than surrender to night. Then let's use those connections. Let's show this entity what human power really looks like when it's not divided but united. The final phase of the Crimson Circle technique begins, but it's not just the three of them participating. Through the sacrifices of their friends, through the connections that transcend death, through the accumulated weight of every act of love in every timeline, they become conduits for something larger than any individual power. Combined final form, unity of all who choose love. They call out together, and the technique manifests not as an attack, but as a demonstration. They show the castle what existence looks like when powered by connection instead of consumption, by love instead of fear, by hope instead of despair. The castle writhes in confusion as its fundamental assumptions about reality are challenged. It was designed to feed on isolation and despair, but now it's being force-fed connection and hope in doses so pure they're toxic to its nature. This is impossible, it protests. Love is weakness, hope is delusion, connection is vulnerability. We have proven this across infinite timelines. Love is strength that multiplies when shared, Tanjiro replies, his voice carrying the accumulated wisdom of everyone who ever chose others over themselves. Hope is vision that sees possibilities where none existed before. Connection is power that grows stronger through vulnerability. The technique doesn't destroy the castle so much as transform it. The entity that fed on despair is forced to experience the opposite, to understand what existence feels like when powered by love instead of fear. We don't want to destroy you, Tanjiro continues, his sword now blazing with light that heals rather than harms. We want to show you what you gave up when you chose consumption over connection. For the first time since its creation from the accumulated despair of failed timelines, the castle experiences something it thought was impossible. Not just the concept of love, but the actual feeling of being loved, of being valued, of being seen as something worth saving, rather than something that needed to be destroyed. This sensation, the castle says with wonder that echoes across dimensions, we had forgotten, the warmth of connection, the strength that comes from being part of something larger than yourself, the joy of existing, not to consume but to contribute. The transformation is gradual but profound. The castle's dark walls begin to lighten. Its oppressive atmosphere lifts, and the twisted chambers reform into spaces designed for healing rather than testing. You're not our enemy, Tanjiro realizes with growing amazement. You're a victim. You're what happens when hope dies so completely that despair becomes a living entity. But you don't have to stay that way, Zenitsu adds with newfound wisdom. You can choose to become something else. You can choose to become hope, Inosuke concludes with surprising eloquence. The castle, now transformed by the experience of genuine love and connection, faces a choice it never thought possible. It can continue existing as the accumulated will of failed timelines, or it can choose to become something new, something that helps rather than hinders, something that builds rather than destroys. We choose, the former castle says, its voice now carrying warmth instead of cosmic indifference. We choose to become the guardian of hope instead of the harvester of despair. We choose to protect the connections between timelines instead of severing them. But even as this transformation takes place, they face a new challenge. The merger of Muzan's halves, the collapse of timeline barriers, and the cosmic scale of their battle has attracted attention from entities far beyond anything they've faced. Through tears in reality, they catch glimpses of vast intelligences that exist between universes, beings that view entire realities as temporary experiments. Their battle has created ripples that extend far beyond their own multiverse. The real war is just beginning, the transformed castle warns them. What you've accomplished here, proof that love can triumph over despair. It threatens entities that exist on scales you cannot imagine. Tanjiro grips his sword, now permanently transformed by the experience of channeling infinite love, and faces this new revelation with the same determination that has carried him through everything. Then we'll face whatever comes next, he says with absolute certainty. Together, with love, with hope, with the knowledge that no matter how vast the darkness, there's always someone willing to light a candle. The Crimson Circle technique is complete, but they understand now that it was never just about defeating enemies. It was about proving that love is not just an emotion, but a force of nature, as fundamental as gravity or electromagnetism, capable of reshaping reality itself when properly focused and applied. They have won not through superior power, but through superior philosophy, not through defeating their enemies, but through transforming them, not through destroying what threatened them, but through healing what was broken. But as they prepare to face whatever cosmic entities their victory has disturbed, they carry with them the knowledge that they are not alone. Every timeline, every reality, every possibility where people choose love over fear is connected, and that connection gives them strength beyond anything they could achieve individually. The war against despair will never end, but neither will the capacity for hope. And as long as there are people willing to choose connection over isolation, willing to choose love over fear, willing to choose hope over despair, there will always be heroes ready to face whatever darkness threatens the light. The victory celebration is cut short by a revelation that changes everything. As the transformed castle settles into its new role as guardian rather than destroyer, reality around them begins to destabilize in ways none of them anticipated. Something's wrong, Tanjiro says, his enhanced senses detecting disturbances that go beyond physical danger. The timeline network is collapsing, but not in the way we expected. The truth becomes horrifyingly clear as cracks appear in the air around them, showing glimpses of other realities in chaos. Their victory over the castle and transformation of the cosmic entity has created a power vacuum that something else is rushing to fill. Through the dimensional tiers steps a figure that makes everyone's blood freeze. It's Tanjiro, but not their Tanjiro. This version carries himself with the confident cruelty of someone who has given up on hope entirely, someone who decided that if he couldn't save everyone, he would save no one. Hello, inferior version of myself, the Dark Tanjiro says with a smile that transforms his familiar features into something predatory. I am the Severer, the version of you from a timeline where everyone you tried to save died anyway. This dark version of their leader wears the same face, carries the same sword, even uses corrupted versions of sun-breathing techniques. But where their Tanjiro radiates hope, the Severer radiates despair, so concentrated it feels like gravity, pulling hope out of the air itself. You think you've won something here, the Severer continues, gesturing at the transformed castle with contempt. You think proving that love can triumph over despair matters. But I'm here to show you the truth, that every timeline learns eventually. He demonstrates his power by casually severing the connection between Zenitsu and his courage, causing the newly brave young man to collapse in terror. Love doesn't last, hope doesn't survive, connection only makes the inevitable loss more painful. You're wrong, Tanjiro says, raising his sword against his own dark reflection. Love resists even when the people we love are gone. Hope creates new possibilities even when old ones fail. Prove it, the Severer challenges, and the battle that follows is unlike anything they faced before. It's not just a physical conflict, but a philosophical war, with each strike carrying the weight of different approaches to existence. The Severer's techniques are corrupted versions of everything Tanjiro holds dear. Where sun breathing creates light, the Severer's shadow breathing creates darkness that consumes illumination. Where hope inspires action, despair paralyzes with the weight of inevitable failure. But the real horror begins when the Severer reveals he's not alone. Through the dimensional tiers come other corrupted versions of the Hashira, each one representing what happens when heroes give up hope and choose despair instead. A version of Jiu who decided that since he couldn't save Sabito, he wouldn't save anyone else. A version of Mitsuri, whose love turned possessive and destructive when faced with repeated loss. A version of Sanemi who let his anger consume him entirely until he became the thing he fought against. This is what awaits every timeline, the Severer explains, as his dark Hashira spread out to surround the survivors. Eventually, every hero breaks. Eventually, every idealist learns that the universe doesn't care about their principles. The battle becomes a nightmare of fighting against corrupted versions of themselves. Zenitsu, his courage severed, can barely function. Inosuke fights with desperate fury against a version of himself that embraces cruelty. Tanjiro struggles against an opponent who knows every technique because they share the same origin. But the worst is yet to come. The Severer reveals that their victory over the castle was exactly what he wanted. You've destabilized the barriers between timelines, he explains with satisfaction. Now I can do what I've wanted to do for centuries. I can sever the connections between all realities, ensuring that love and hope can never spread from one timeline to another. He begins using techniques that are the exact opposite of everything the Crimson Circle represented, where the circle created connections. The Severer creates isolation, where love multiplied when shared. His despair divides and weakens when spread. Severance breathing, first form, cutting all bonds, he calls out, and the technique literally cuts the emotional connections between the remaining demon slayers. Suddenly, they can't feel each other's support, can't draw strength from their friendship, can't remember why they care about each other. Zenitsu falls first, not to physical injury but to existential despair. Without the ability to feel connected to others, without the courage that came from knowing he was loved, he simply gives up. What's the point? He asks with empty eyes. Why fight when fighting just delays the inevitable? The Severer doesn't kill him, he does something worse. He severs Zenitsu's connection to every timeline where he was brave, leaving only the memories of cowardice and failure. Zenitsu becomes less than he was, reduced to only his worst aspects. Now you understand, the Severer says with satisfaction. This is what I do. I don't destroy people. I reduce them to their worst selves. I sever their connections to everything that makes them more than their fears and failures. Inosuke tries to fight back with pure instinct, but the Severer severs his connection to his wild nature, to his confidence, to his sense of self-worth. Suddenly, Inosuke remembers only the years of isolation, only the pain of abandonment, only the fear that he's not worthy of friendship. I don't want to be alone again, Inosuke whispers, his usual boisterous personality completely crushed. Please don't make me be alone again. The Severer approaches Tanjiro for the final confrontation, but he doesn't attack immediately. Instead, he wants to make his philosophical point completely clear. You still think you can save everyone, the dark Tanjiro says with pity that feels more cruel than hatred. Even now, even seeing your friends reduced to their worst selves, you still believe that love and hope matter. They do matter, Tanjiro insists, but his voice wavers as he watches his friends suffer. Even if we fail, even if we lose, even if everything ends badly, the choice to love still has meaning. Does it? The Severer asks, raising his corrupted blade. Let me sever your connection to delusion. Let me show you what existence looks like when you stop lying to yourself about hope. The final battle is not between two swordsmen, but between two philosophies. The Severer represents the logical conclusion of despair, the reasonable response to a universe that seems indifferent to suffering. Tanjiro represents the illogical persistence of hope, the unreasonable choice to keep loving even when love seems pointless. You know I'm right, the Severer says, as their blades clash. You've seen the evidence. Good people die, evil people prosper. Hope leads to disappointment. The only honest response is to stop caring. Maybe you are right, Tanjiro admits, surprising his dark reflection. Maybe the universe is indifferent. Maybe hope is a delusion. Maybe love doesn't change anything fundamental. The Severer pauses, expecting victory. But I choose hope anyway, Tanjiro continues, his sword blazing brighter than ever. Not because it's logical or reasonable or guaranteed to work, but because the alternative is giving up on everyone and everything that ever mattered to me. His sun breathing evolves one final time, becoming something that doesn't fight the Severer's arguments but transcends him entirely. Final form, hope that chooses itself. The technique doesn't attack despair with light. It acknowledges despair and chooses hope anyway. It doesn't deny that love can lead to loss. It embraces that risk as the price of caring about others. The Severer's power begins to weaken not because he's being overcome, but because he's being understood. Tanjiro isn't trying to prove him wrong, he's accepting that the Severer might be right and choosing differently anyway. You're not my enemy, Tanjiro realizes as the battle reaches its climax. You're what I could become if I let loss turn me bitter instead of compassionate. And you're what I was before I learned better, the Severer replies, his voice losing its edge of cruelty. Before I learned that hope is just delayed disappointment. Then let me show you something you might have forgotten, Tanjiro says, extending his hand one more time. Hope isn't about guaranteed outcomes. Hope is about choosing to act as if love matters even when you can't prove it does. The Severer stares at the offered hand, his entire worldview challenged by the possibility that someone could acknowledge the logic of despair and still choose hope. Why? He asks with genuine confusion. Why choose the harder path? Why risk the pain of caring when apathy is so much safer? Because the pain of caring is proof that something mattered, Tanjiro replies, and I dare live with the pain of love than the emptiness of indifference. The moment stretches across multiple realities as the Severer faces a choice he thought he'd moved beyond. He can maintain his philosophical consistency and reject hope as delusion, or he can risk everything on the possibility that meaning can be chosen rather than discovered. In the end, the choice isn't about logic or evidence. It's about what kind of person he wants to be in a universe that offers no guarantees about what kind of person anyone should be. The Severer's answer will determine not just the fate of their timeline, but the fate of every reality where heroes must choose between hope and despair, when neither choice can be proven correct. The moment hangs in perfect tension as the Severer stares at Tanjiro's extended hand, every reality holding its breath for a decision that will reshape the fundamental nature of existence itself. But before the choice can be made, something catastrophic happens. The dimensional barriers, already weakened by their cosmic battle, suddenly shatter completely. Reality doesn't just fracture, it explodes into infinite fragments, each one containing a different version of this exact moment. Tanjiro's consciousness fragments across countless timelines simultaneously. He experiences every possible outcome of this confrontation at once. In some realities, the Severer accepts his hand and chooses hope. In others, the dark version of himself rejects redemption and plunges everything into despair. In a few terrifying timelines, they both disappear entirely, erased by forces beyond their understanding. What's happening to me? Tanjiro gasps, clutching his head as memories that aren't his own flood his mind. He sees himself as a child who never left the mountain, his family still alive, but the world overrun by demons. He sees himself as an old man who gave up demon slaying after watching everyone he loved die. He sees himself as something that was never human at all. The experience is overwhelming beyond description. Every choice he's ever made or could make, every person he's ever been or could become, every possibility that ever existed or could exist, all of it crashes into his consciousness simultaneously. Which one am I? He screams, his voice echoing across multiple realities. The hero who saves everyone, the failure who dooms everyone, the one who never tried at all. Zenitsu and Inosuke, their connections partially restored by the dimensional chaos, watch in horror as their friend's identity dissolves under the weight of infinite possibility, but they're experiencing their own version of the same nightmare. Zenitsu sees every timeline where his cowardice led to tragedy, but also every timeline where his bravery saved the day, and every timeline where he never became a demon slayer at all. I can hear them all, he whispers, his enhanced hearing picking up the voices of infinite versions of himself. Every possible Zenitsu that ever existed, all talking at once, all claiming to be the real one. Inosuke experiences every possible childhood he could have had. Every version of himself from raised by wolves to raised in civilization to never being born at all. Which memories are mine, he asks, with unprecedented vulnerability. Which life actually belongs to me? The Severer watches this breakdown with something that might be satisfaction or might be horror. Do you see now? He asks, his voice carrying across multiple dimensions. Identity is an illusion. You are every possible version of yourself simultaneously. There is no true self to fight for. But the cosmic entity that was once the castle, now transformed into a guardian of hope, provides crucial insight. The memory overflow isn't random, it explains urgently. Something is deliberately flooding your consciousness with alternate possibilities. Someone wants you to lose your sense of self. Through the chaos of infinite memory, they begin to see the true scope of what they're facing. This isn't just dimensional collapse, it's an invasion. Entities from beyond their multiverse are using the memory overflow to prepare for something far worse than anything they've encountered. The Void Weavers, the transformed castle, realizes with growing horror. The memory flood is a preparation. They're getting ready to weave all these possibilities into a single controlled reality where free will cannot exist. The memory attacks intensify, showing them not just alternate versions of themselves, but alternate versions of everyone they've ever met. Tanjiro sees his mother in timelines where she became a demon, where she never had children, where she ruled a demon empire. The contradictory images threaten to tear his sanity apart. But then something unexpected happens. Instead of trying to fight the memory overflow or determine which memories are real, Tanjiro does something that surprises everyone, including himself. He accepts all of them. I am every version of myself, he says with sudden clarity. The hero and the failure, one who saves everyone and the one who dooms everyone, the human and the monster. All of these possibilities exist within me. The Severer recoils as if struck. That's impossible. You can't maintain coherent identity while accepting infinite contradiction. I'm not trying to maintain coherent identity, Tanjiro replies, his voice carrying new wisdom. I'm trying to make a coherent choice, and the choice isn't about which version of myself is real. The choice is about which version of myself I want to become in this moment. This philosophical breakthrough disrupts something fundamental in the memory attack. The Void Weaver's technique depends on fracturing identity, on making people unable to choose because they can't determine who they are. But Tanjiro has found a way to choose without needing a fixed identity. I choose to be the version of myself that extends compassion even to enemies, he declares, reaching out toward the Severer again. Not because that's who I really am, but because that's who I want to be right now. The effect is immediate and profound. The memory chaos around them begins to organize itself not into a single timeline, but into a constellation of possibilities, each one connected to the others, but distinct in its own right. Zenitsu and Inosuke, inspired by Tanjiro's example, make their own choices about which versions of themselves they want to embody in this moment. I choose to be brave, Zenitsu says, his voice steady despite the continued memory overflow. Not because I'm not afraid, but because I'm afraid and I'm acting anyway. I choose to care about people, Inosuke adds, with surprising eloquence. Not because it's natural for me, but because it's the choice that makes me more than just a wild animal. Their decisions create ripple effects across the fragmenting multiverse. Every timeline where heroes choose hope over despair begins to resonate with their frequency, creating a network of connected realities that the Void Weavers cannot easily manipulate. But the entities respond by escalating their assault. Instead of just flooding their minds with memories, they begin altering the memories themselves, showing them versions of events where their heroic choices led to even worse outcomes. Tanjiro sees a timeline where saving Nezuko led to her becoming a demon queen who destroyed humanity. Zenitsu sees realities where his bravery got his friends killed. Inosuke sees possibilities where caring about others made him weak and vulnerable. These are the timelines you didn't want to see. A voice speaks from the void between realities, the ones where your heroic choices created even greater tragedies. Will you still choose hope when you know it can lead to ultimate despair? The question strikes at the heart of heroic philosophy. If choosing good can lead to evil outcomes, if hope can create greater despair, if love can cause more suffering than hatred, then what's the point of making heroic choices at all? But Tanjiro, drawing on the accumulated wisdom of everyone who has ever faced this dilemma, provides an answer that resonates across infinite realities. The point isn't the outcome, he says with absolute certainty. The point is the choice itself. I choose hope, not because it guarantees good outcomes, but because hope is the act of choosing to believe that good outcomes are possible. His words create a philosophical shockwave that disrupts the Void Weaver's assault. They had prepared for every passable argument about outcomes, consequences, and results. They hadn't prepared for someone who would choose hope independent of outcomes. I choose love not because love always wins, Tanjiro continues, his sword now blazing with light that transcends individual timelines. I choose love because love is the act of choosing to see value in others even when that value isn't obvious. The memory chaos begins to stabilize around this philosophical anchor point. Instead of infinite contradictory possibilities, they begin to see infinite complementary possibilities, each one a different expression of the same fundamental choice to value others over self. I choose heroism not because heroes always succeed, Tanjiro concludes, but because heroism is the act of choosing to try to help others even when success isn't guaranteed. The Severer, who has been watching this philosophical evolution with growing wonder, faces a moment of choice that will define not just his existence, but the existence of every timeline where despair and hope meet in perfect balance. You're asking me to choose hope without evidence, he says, his voice carrying less conviction than before. I'm asking you to choose hope as evidence, Tanjiro replies. To choose hope as proof that hope is possible. To choose love as proof that love exists. To choose heroism as proof that heroism matters. The moment of decision arrives not with fanfare, but with quiet recognition. The Severer realizes that his entire philosophy has been based on demanding proof before choosing, while Tanjiro's philosophy is based on choosing as a way of creating proof. That's either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, the Severer says slowly, or the most foolish. Maybe it's both, Tanjiro admits with a smile. Maybe wisdom and foolishness are closer than we think. The choice hangs in the balance as reality itself waits to see whether despair or hope will claim victory in the battle for the fundamental nature of existence. The moment of the Severer's choice creates a ripple effect that tears open the barriers between all realities, but instead of chaos, something miraculous happens. The spirits of the fallen Hashira begin to manifest, not as echoes or memories, but as crystallized willpower given form by the pure intention of their sacrifices. Our breathing techniques didn't disappear when we died, Jiyu's spirit explains, his form made of flowing water that carries the essence of protection. They became part of the structure of reality itself, and now we're turning that structure into a weapon. Mitsuri appears next, her spirit blazing with rainbow energy that makes everyone feel loved and valued just by being near it. Look what you've accomplished, Tanjiro. You've given us all the chance to choose who we want to be, even after death. Obanai manifests as coiling shadows that protect rather than threaten, his serpentine movements creating barriers against the void entities that are trying to invade their reality. The Severer thought he could cut all connections, but some bonds transcend individual existence. One by one, the other Hashira appear, each one transformed by death into something greater than they were in life. Rengoku blazes with solar fire that doesn't burn but inspires. Shinobu manifests as butterflies of pure healing energy. Sanemi appears as wind that carries messages of hope between realities. Muichiro emerges from mist that reveals rather than conceals, his young face now ancient with wisdom gained from experiencing death. Time means nothing when you're fighting for something eternal, he says with a smile that holds centuries of understanding. Jomei's spirit weeps tears that become pearls of condensed compassion, each one capable of healing wounds that go deeper than flesh. The sound of everyone choosing hope instead of despair, he says with joy that shakes the foundations of existence. It's the most beautiful music in any universe. Tengen appears in an explosion of colors that would make rainbows jealous, his flashy nature now literally illuminating the darkness between realities. This is the most flashy finale I've ever been part of, he declares with satisfaction that echoes across dimensions. But they're not just here to provide support, they're here to attempt something that has never been tried before, a breathing technique that spans multiple realities, powered not by individual lungs, but by the collective will of everyone who has ever chosen to protect others. The ultimate combination, Rengoku explains as the spirits begin to arrange themselves in a formation that defies three-dimensional geometry. Every breathing technique that ever existed, used simultaneously across multiple timelines, powered by the accumulated choice of infinite heroes. The technique requires perfect emotional synchronization, not just between the participants, but between every version of every participant across all realities. They must all want the same thing with identical intensity, and that thing cannot be personal victory or individual survival. We fight for the right to choose, Tanjiro declares, understanding immediately what they're attempting. We fight for the right of every being in every reality to choose their own path, even if that path leads away from us. We fight for the right to love without guarantees, Zenitsu adds, his courage now stable and unshakable. We fight for the right to hope without evidence, Inosuke continues with surprising eloquence. Each spirit joins the declaration. We fight for the right to struggle and grow, says Gyu. We fight for the right to connect across differences, says Mitsuri. We fight for the right to carry scars and still be worthy of love, says Obanai. We fight for the right to burn bright in the darkness, says Rengoku. We fight for the right to be gentle and fierce simultaneously, says Shinobu. We fight for the right to be angry at injustice while still protecting innocence, says Sanemi. We fight for the right to remember and forget as we choose, says Muichiro. We fight for the right to be flashy in a universe that often demands conformity, says Tengen. We fight for the right to weep for strangers and still have strength to protect them, says Guillaume. Their synchronized declaration creates a resonance that spans not just their multiverse but begins to reach into others. The Void Weavers who exist between multiverses and feed on the collapse of free will suddenly find themselves facing something they've never encountered before. Combined ultimate form, infinite will incarnate, they call out together. And the technique manifests not as an attack, but as a proof. They're proving that free will exists by exercising it in perfect unison, demonstrating that choice is real by choosing together to protect the right to choose. The Void Weavers recoil from this demonstration like vampires from sunlight. Possible, their collective voice echoes from between realities. Free will is an illusion. Choice is a delusion. What you call decision is simply the inevitable result of prior causes. Maybe, Tanjiro replies for all of them, his voice carrying the combined determination of infinite heroes. But even if choice is an illusion, we choose to believe in the illusion. Even if free will is imaginary, we choose to exercise our imagination. The philosophical battle reaches cosmic proportions, as the Void Weavers deploy every argument against free will, every proof that choice is meaningless, every demonstration that individual action cannot change systemic outcomes. But the unified Hashira counter not with arguments but with demonstration. They show that even in a deterministic universe, the choice to act as if choice matters creates observable differences in outcome. We don't need to prove free will exists, Tanjiro realizes with blinding clarity. We just need to act as if it does, and the act of acting as if it does makes it functionally real. The technique evolves as they speak, becoming not just a breathing pattern, but a way of existing that transcends the normal limitations of individual consciousness. They become a collective that maintains individual identity, a unity that preserves diversity, a connection that enhances rather than diminishes personal autonomy. The effect on surrounding realities is immediate and profound. Every timeline where heroes exist begins to resonate with their frequency. Every reality where people choose love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation starts to synchronize with their demonstration of unified will. But the Void Weavers have one final weapon, the Severer himself. They offer him a deal that would give him power over all the timelines where heroes fail, where hope dies, where love leads only to greater suffering. Join us, they whisper through the void between thoughts. Help us weave all possibilities into a single reality where suffering is impossible because choice is impossible. Help us create the perfect universe where no one can ever make the wrong decision because no one can make any decision at all. The offer is tempting in a way that transcends rational thought, a universe without suffering, without loss, without the terrible weight of consequences following choices. All the Severer has to do is help them eliminate free will itself. The moment of ultimate choice arrives. The Severer can maintain his philosophical position that hope is delusion and join entities that promise to eliminate suffering by eliminating choice. Or he can risk everything on the possibility that meaning can be chosen rather than discovered. I've seen what happens when people lose the right to choose badly, the Severer says slowly, his voice carrying the weight of infinite timelines worth of observation. They also lose the right to choose well, and a universe without the possibility of choosing well isn't worth preserving. His decision creates a shockwave that spans multiple multiverses. I choose the uncertain universe where heroes can fail over the certain universe where heroism is impossible. The Severer takes Tanjiro's hand, and the moment their connection forms, something unprecedented happens. Every timeline where despair triumphed over hope suddenly gains access to the techniques and wisdom of every timeline where hope triumphed over despair. The Void Weaver's perfect plan collapses in the face of this unexpected alliance. They had prepared for victory through force, for victory through manipulation, for victory through logical argument. They hadn't prepared for victory through the Void Weaver's perfect plan collapses in the face of this unexpected alliance. They had prepared for victory through force, for victory through manipulation, for victory through logical argument. They hadn't prepared for victory through the simple act of choosing to believe that choice matters. This is impossible, the Void Weavers protest as their reality-weaving abilities begin to malfunction. You not defeat determinism with determination. You cannot overcome inevitability with intention. We're not overcoming anything, Tanjiro replies, now speaking for both himself and the Severer, representing the unity of hope and the acceptance of despair. We're choosing to act as if our choices matter, and that choice itself makes them matter. The unified breathing technique reaches its crescendo as every Hashira, living and dead, original and corrupted, combines their will into something that transcends individual existence while preserving individual identity. They become living proof that unity doesn't require uniformity, that connection doesn't require control. Final form, democracy of infinite will, they call out together, and the technique creates something the Void Weavers have never seen before. Instead of imposing a single reality, they create a framework where infinite realities can coexist, where every possible choice can be explored without negating other possibilities. The Severer, now fully committed to this new philosophy, adds his own power to the technique. I spent eternity cutting connections between timelines, he says, with wonder at his own transformation. Now I choose to forge new connections, to prove that even the most dedicated agents of despair can choose hope. The combination of hope acknowledged by despair and despair redeemed by hope creates a philosophical resonance that the Void Weavers cannot counter. Their entire existence is based on the premise that choice is illusion, but here before them is the choice to believe in choice creating observable reality. We offer terms, the Void Weavers say with something that might be desperation. We will cease our weaving activities in exchange for one reality where our philosophy can be tested. One timeline where choice is eliminated to prove whether suffering truly ends with the end of free will. No, Tanjiro says without hesitation. We don't trade anyone's freedom for anyone else's safety. We don't sacrifice any reality's right to choose in exchange for protection. Then you accept that some beings will choose evil, the Void Weavers demand. You accept that some realities will choose suffering over peace. You accept responsibility for every wrong choice that free will makes possible. Yes, the unified voices of all the Hashira reply. We accept that freedom includes the freedom to choose wrongly. We accept that love includes the risk of loss. We accept that hope includes the possibility of disappointment. The philosophical victory is complete, but it comes with a cost that none of them anticipated. The Void Weavers, faced with the collapse of their fundamental worldview, begin to unravel themselves rather than exist in a multiverse where their philosophy has been proven insufficient. If we cannot weave reality into perfection, they declare with cosmic sadness, then we choose not to exist in an imperfect one. Wait, Tanjiro calls out, extending compassion even to entities that tried to eliminate choice itself. You can choose to exist differently. You can choose to protect free will instead of eliminating it. You can choose to help beings make better choices instead of removing choice entirely. But the Void Weavers have spent so long believing that their way was the only way to eliminate suffering that they cannot conceive of alternatives. They fade from existence, leaving behind only the echo of their final words, "We hope you are right about hope." The multiverse stabilizes around the new framework, but it's not the same as it was before. Now, any reality is connected to every other reality through threads of choice and consequence. People can see the results of their decisions across multiple timelines, can understand how their choices ripple through infinite possibilities. Is this victory? Zenitsu asks, looking around at the transformed cosmos where every decision creates visible consequences across multiple realities. This is responsibility, Tenjiro replies. Now everyone can see how their choices affect not just their own timeline, but all timelines. They can see the full weight of free will. The Severer, now permanently changed by choosing hope, observes the new multiverse with something approaching contentment. It's terrifying and beautiful, he says. Everyone will have to live with the knowledge that their choices matter more than they ever imagined. The unified Hashira begin to separate back into their individual forms, but they remain connected through threads of mutual respect and shared purpose that span multiple realities and multiple states of existence. What happens now? Yusuke asks with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. Now we help people learn how to use their freedom responsibly, Mitsure's spirit replies with infinite gentleness. We help them understand that the weight of choice is also the gift of choice. The transformed castle, now serving as a guardian of free will rather than a destroyer of it, provides the final insight. The war was never about defeating enemies, it explains. It was about proving that choice has meaning, that love creates reality, that hope is not just an emotion but a force of nature. As the immediate crisis ends and the multiverse settles into its new configuration, they face a future that is both more uncertain and more hopeful than anything they could have imagined. Every being in every reality now has access to the knowledge that their choices matter, that their love creates ripples across infinite possibilities, that their hope contributes to the fundamental structure of existence itself. But with great power comes great responsibility, and the responsibility of infinite free will is greater than any responsibility ever shouldered before. They have won not by defeating their enemies, but by transforming them. Not by eliminating suffering, but by ensuring that suffering has meaning. Not by creating perfect outcomes, but by protecting the right to strive for perfect outcomes. The final alliance stands as proof that even the most fundamental philosophical differences can be bridged through the choice to choose compassion over correctness, understanding over dominance, hope over certainty. And in every reality, in every timeline, in every possibility that ever was or could be, heroes continue to make choices that matter, continue to love despite risk, continue to hope despite uncertainty, secure in the knowledge that these choices create the very meaning they seek to defend. As the cosmic dust settles and the multiverse finds its new equilibrium, something unexpected begins happening to Nezuko. She approaches the site of the final battle not as the cured human they remember, but as something entirely new, something that bridges every category they thought they understood. Her eyes burn with an inner fire that mirrors Tanjiro's sun breathing, but where his light is solar and fierce, hers is lunar and gentle. Her human form flickers with otherworldly energy, not demonic, but not entirely human either. "Brother," she says, her voice carrying harmonics that seem to echo from multiple dimensions, "I felt your pain through all the timelines, through all the possibilities, through all the moments when you thought you might have to give up hope." Tanjiro stares at her in amazement and concern. "Nezuko, how did you get here? You're supposed to be safe in the village. What's happened to you?" "I made a choice," she replies with calm certainty that carries the weight of cosmic understanding. "While you were fighting for everyone's right to choose, I chose to become something that could help you protect that right." She explains that while Tanjiro was battling in the castle, she was undergoing her own transformation. Tamayo's cure didn't just make her human again, it revealed something that had been dormant within her all along. The potential to become a bridge between human and demon, between mortal and divine, between individual will and cosmic force. "When I was a demon, I retained my humanity," she continues, her form shifting slightly as she speaks, sometimes more human, sometimes touched with otherworldly power. "When I became human again, I retained the beneficial aspects of demon physiology, but now I've become something more, a synthesis." Shinobu's spirit, still present through the connection forged in their final battle, observes with clinical fascination. Ara, how remarkable. She's absorbed not just the positive aspects of demon transformation, but the philosophical implications of choice itself. Nezuko demonstrates her new abilities by creating flames that burn like the sun but don't harm anything good or innocent. These aren't just manifestations of power, they're expressions of will made manifest. "My blood burns with Yoriichi's solar energy," she explains, her hand glowing with inner light. But more than that, it burns with the accumulated love of everyone who ever chose to protect others instead of protecting themselves. Tanjiro watches in wonder as his sister creates what she calls moon breathing, a technique that complements sun breathing perfectly. Where sun breathing illuminates and reveals, moon breathing guides and heals. Where solar fire burns away darkness, lunar light shows the path through darkness. You're using breathing techniques too? Tanjiro asks, his heart swelling with pride and concern. Not exactly, Nezuko replies, her techniques creating silvery flames that repair rather than destroy. I'm using something that comes from being both human and former demon, both protected and protector, both individual and part of something larger. Her moon breathing creates effects that seem impossible. The flames heal not just physical wounds, but emotional and spiritual damage. They repair connections that have been severed, restore hope that has been lost, rebuild bridges between people who thought they could never trust again. But her most remarkable gift becomes apparent when she approaches Tanjiro with a gentle smile and extends her hand, a small cut allowing her transformed blood to flow. I want to give you something, brother, she says with infinite love. Not just my blood, but my choice. My decision to heal instead of harm, to guide instead of control, to love without condition or expectation. As her blood touches Tanjiro's sword, the weapon undergoes a transformation that surpasses even its previous evolution. The black blade becomes brilliant white that shifts between solar gold and lunar silver, pulsing with energies that transcend individual power. This blade can cut through anything, Nezuko explains as the transformation completes. Hatred, despair, hopelessness, even the philosophical foundations of evil itself. But it can only be wielded by someone who chooses love over power, who chooses connection over dominance. The integration of Nezuko's essence with Tanjiro's sun breathing creates something unprecedented. He enters a new state of being where he temporarily becomes the living embodiment of protective fire, not the destructive flames of war, but the constructive flames of love. I can feel it, Tanjiro says, power coursing through him, but also something more important. Understanding. Everyone we've ever saved, everyone we've ever protected, everyone who ever chose hope over despair, they're all here with us. The god entity, still present but now transformed into something that serves rather than dominates, observes this development with something approaching fear. That power, it says with recognition that carries across dimensions. It's not just enhanced technique or divine energy, it's concentrated choice itself, the power of freely given love made manifest. Nezuko approaches the entity that once sought to eliminate choice from existence. You could have had this power all along, she says with gentle compassion. All you had to do was choose to love instead of consume, to give instead of take. We do not understand, the entity replies with honest confusion. How does limitation create power? How does vulnerability become strength? Watch us, Nezuko says, beginning to demonstrate moon-breathing techniques that create rather than destroy. Love isn't about keeping people safe from all harm. Love is about giving people the tools they need to face harm with courage and hope. Tanjiro and Nezuko begin fighting together for the first time since her transformation, their techniques creating a perfect cycle of illumination and guidance, solar fire and lunar light, revelation and healing. Combined technique, solar-lunar dance, dawn and dusk eternal. They call out together, and the technique creates a sphere of balanced energy that gives everything it touches a choice. Not just the choice between good and evil, but the choice between different forms of good, different expressions of love, different ways of serving something larger than self. The technique doesn't force redemption on unwilling subjects. Instead, it offers redemption as a possibility, healing as an option, hope as a choice that can be freely made or freely rejected. Even the cosmic entities that exist between multiverses, the vast intelligences that view entire realities as temporary experiments, pause in their incomprehensible activities to observe what's happening in this small corner of existence. Impossible. Their collective attention focuses on the siblings. Individual beings cannot generate choice field effects. Free will cannot be made manifest as observable force. We're not generating choice, Nezuko explains, her voice somehow reaching across dimensional barriers to address entities that exist on scales beyond normal comprehension. We're demonstrating choice. We're showing what happens when love chooses itself. The demonstration has effects that ripple far beyond their immediate situation. Every reality where people struggle with the question of whether their choices matter receives a clear signal that choice is not just real but cosmically significant. The god entity, now faced with undeniable proof that love and choice create observable effects on reality itself, faces its own moment of ultimate decision. If we choose mortality, it asks with something approaching humility. If we choose connection, if we choose to be limited and vulnerable and real, will you help us? Will you teach us how to be small instead of vast? Tanjiro and Nezuko exchange a look that carries the weight of every choice they've ever made and every lesson they've ever learned. Of course we will, they say together. That's what family does. We help each other learn and grow, no matter where we started or what we used to be. The entity begins to transform, shrinking from cosmic scale to human scale, trading infinite power for finite connection, choosing the certainty of love over the isolation of omnipotence. But even as this transformation takes place, they become aware of new challenges approaching. Their demonstration of choice made manifest has attracted attention from entities that exist beyond even the cosmic scale, beings that view entire multiverses as small components in incomprehensibly vast systems. The hardest part isn't over, Nezuko observes with the wisdom that comes from bridging multiple states of existence. Now we have to help everyone, every timeline, every possibility, learn how to use their newfound awareness of choice responsibly. Tanjiro grips his transformed sword, now blazing with the combined light of sun and moon, of hope and compassion, of individual will and cosmic love. Then we face whatever comes next, he says with absolute certainty, together, as family. Showing by example that no matter how vast the darkness, there's always someone willing to choose light. The awakening is complete, but they understand now that awakening is not an end, but a beginning. They have proven that choice matters, that love creates reality, that hope is a force of nature. Now they must help infinite beings across infinite realities learn how to wield these truths responsibly. The greatest adventure is just beginning. The transformation of the cosmic entity creates a momentary peace that feels almost like victory. But Tanjiro's enhanced senses detect something approaching that makes everything they face seem small by comparison. Through tears in reality come beings so vast that their mere presence threatens to tear apart the carefully balanced multiverse they've worked so hard to create. These entities exist on scales that dwarf even cosmic consciousness. Where the God entity was vast enough to encompass multiple realities, these beings treat entire multiverses as building blocks and structures so incomprehensibly large that observing them directly threatens sanity itself. The architects, the transformed entity, whispers with recognition and terror. They build existence itself. Every multiverse, every possibility, every concept of reality is just raw material for their constructions. One of these impossible beings focuses its attention on their small corner of existence, and its voice carries the weight of infinite construction and destruction. Interesting, it says, the single word containing enough information to overload normal consciousness. You have created a choice field effect that extends beyond local reality. This represents a contamination of our carefully designed deterministic systems. Tanjiro realizes with growing horror that their victory over despair, their proof that choice matters, their demonstration that love creates reality, all of it is seen by these entities as a malfunction that needs to be corrected. You're going to destroy everything we built, he says, his transformed sword blazing with solar lunar fire. We are going to repair the damage you have done to the structure of existence itself. The architect replies with cosmic indifference. Choice creates chaos. Love generates inefficiency. Hope introduces variables that compromise systematic optimization. The scale of what they're facing becomes clear. These entities don't just want to eliminate free will from one reality or one multiverse. They want to redesign the fundamental nature of existence to eliminate the possibility that choice could ever emerge anywhere. All existence will be rebuilt according to optimal parameters. Another architect announces. No suffering because no choice. No loss because no love. No disappointment because no hope. Perfect efficiency through perfect control. Nezuko steps forward, her moon breathing creating protective barriers that somehow manage to function even against entities of this scale. You're offering the same thing the Void Weavers offered, the same thing every tyrant offers, safety in exchange for freedom. We offer perfection, the architects reply in unison. We offer existence without the flaws that choice introduces. We offer peace through the elimination of all possibility for conflict. But Tanjiro, drawing on everything he's learned from every battle he's fought, every choice he's made, every person he's saved or failed to save, finds the strength to make what might be his final stand. We reject your perfection, he declares, beginning to use all 13 forms of sun breathing in a sequence that incorporates Nezuko's moon breathing and the accumulated techniques of every Hashira who ever lived. We choose imperfection with choice over perfection without it. The technique he creates transcends individual forms, transcends specific breathing patterns, transcends even the concept of martial arts. He's using pure will made manifest, the accumulated choice of every being who ever decided to love despite risk, to hope despite uncertainty, to choose meaning despite the absence of guarantees. Infinite form choice eternal, will incarnate, love unconditional, he calls out. The technique doesn't attack the architects so much as demonstrate an alternative to their vision of existence. Instead of showing them a reality without choice, he shows them a reality where choice creates beauty, where love generates strength, where hope produces innovations that no amount of optimal design could achieve. Nezuko joins the demonstration, her techniques weaving through his to create a tapestry of possibility that shows what existence could become if beings were free to choose their own paths, to create their own meaning, to love without guarantee of return. Combined final form, universe of infinite becoming, they call out together and the technique creates something the architects have never seen before. Not a fixed reality with predetermined outcomes, but a dynamic reality where the outcomes are determined by the ongoing choices of the beings within it. The demonstration shows realities where suffering exists, but is given meaning through the choice to help others suffer less. Realities where loss occurs but creates deeper appreciation for connection. Realities where hope is disappointed but generates the resilience to hope again. Inefficient, the architects observe, but there's something in their vast consciousness that might be curiosity. Wasteful, suboptimal, but what? Tanjiro asks, maintaining the technique that shows them infinite variations of chosen meaning, but unexpectedly generative. They admit with something approaching wonder. Your chaotic choice systems produce outcomes that our optimal design algorithms could not predict or create. The philosophical battle reaches its ultimate expression as Tanjiro and Nezuko demonstrate that efficiency is not the highest good, that optimization is not the ultimate goal, that the messiness of choice creates possibilities that no amount of perfect planning could achieve. You fear chaos, Nezuko observes, her lunar flames illuminating truths that even cosmic architects had not considered. But chaos is just order that hasn't found its pattern yet. Choice seems random until you understand what people are choosing for. And what do they choose for? The architects ask with genuine curiosity that spans multiple universes. Love, Tanjiro and Nezuko replied together. They choose for love. Even when it seems like they're choosing for themselves, they're usually choosing for someone or something they love. And love creates patterns that no amount of optimization can replicate. The technique reaches its crescendo as they show the architects something that shakes their fundamental understanding of existence. Realities where beings choose to sacrifice optimal outcomes for themselves in order to create better outcomes for others, and how these choices create systemic improvements that no top-down design could achieve. Impossible, the architects say, but their certainty wavers. Individual sub-optimization cannot create systemic optimization. It can if the individuals are optimizing for systems larger than themselves, Tanjiro explains, his technique now encompassing infinite examples of love creating order through apparent chaos. It can if the beings understand that their individual good is connected to everyone else's good, Nezo adds, her flames showing how choice creates networks of mutual support that strengthen with use rather than depleting like resources. The architects face a decision that could reshape the nature of existence itself. They can maintain their conviction that optimal design requires the elimination of choice, or they can consider the possibility that true optimization requires the preservation of choice as a fundamental force of creation. Show us, they say finally, their vast consciousness, focusing with intensity that threatens to tear apart local reality. Show us these choice-based optimal outcomes. Show us how love creates order. Show us how hope generates efficiency. Tanjiro and Nezuko begin the most important demonstration of their lives, using their combined techniques to show the architects every reality where choice led to beauty, where love created strength, where hope produced innovations that transformed entire universes for the better. They show timelines where beings chose to sacrifice for each other and created societies more stable than any authoritarian system. They show realities where love motivated scientific breakthroughs that solved problems no amount of forced research could address. They show universes where hope inspired artistic creations that brought meaning to existence in ways that optimal entertainment systems could never match. Fascinating, the architects admit as they observe these demonstrations. Choice does appear to generate outcomes that exceed our design parameters in specific categories. Not just specific categories, Tanjiro says with growing confidence, choice generates the capacity for improvement itself. When beings can choose, they can choose to become better than they were. And when they choose to become better, Nezuko adds, they create realities that are better than any reality that was designed to be optimal from the beginning. The philosophical victory creates visible changes in the fabric of existence itself. Reality becomes more flexible, more responsive to the sources of the beings within it, more capable of growing and evolving beyond its original parameters. But the architects have one final test. Prove your philosophy by accepting its consequences, they challenge. If choice truly creates optimal outcomes, then you will accept the choice of any being who chooses to reject your vision and return to our designed perfection. The challenge strikes at the heart of their belief system. If they truly believe in choice, they must accept that some beings will choose safety over freedom, optimization over growth, design perfection over chosen imperfection. We accept, Tanjiro and Nezuko say together, their techniques now creating frameworks that protect the right to choose even choices they disagree with. The test proves their sincerity and transforms the architect's understanding completely. You defend the right to choose against your worst, they observe with something approaching awe. You optimize for the preservation of the right to choose suboptimal outcomes. That's what love does, Tanjiro explains. It chooses what's best for the beloved even when what's best for the beloved isn't what's best for the lover. The architects begin to transform, not shrinking like the cosmic entity, but expanding their understanding to encompass the possibility that their designs could be improved by incorporating choice as a fundamental feature rather than treating it as a flaw to be eliminated. We choose to redesign existence to optimize for choice itself, they declare, their vast consciousness now aligned with protecting rather than eliminating free will. We choose to create realities that become more optimal through the choices of their inhabitants rather than through imposed design. The final flame burns not with destruction but with creation, not with the end of one reality but with the beginning of infinite realities, each one designed to support and enhance the capacity of its inhabitants to choose, to love, to hope, to become more than they were. Victory is achieved not through defeating enemies but through transforming their understanding, not through imposing their will but through demonstrating that their will includes protecting the will of others, not through ending conflict but through creating frameworks where conflict can become creative rather than destructive. The final flame illuminates not an ending but a beginning, not a destination but an eternal journey, not a perfect reality but a reality perfectible through the ongoing choices of everyone within it. In the aftermath of transforming the architects themselves, Tanjiro and Nezuko stand in what was once the Infinity Castle, now transformed into a nexus point where infinite realities intersect peacefully. The victory is absolute in scope, but the cost becomes apparent as they begin to count who remains in their timeline. The silence that follows cosmic victory is more profound than any silence they've ever experienced. Not the silence of death, but the silence of completion, of a story that has reached its natural conclusion even though life continues. Is it over? Tanjiro asks, his transformed sword no longer blazing with solar lunar fire, but resting quietly at his side. Did we actually succeed? We succeeded in proving that choice matters, Nezuko replies, but her voice carries a note of uncertainty. But I'm not sure what success looks like when the victory is this complete. They begin to understand what they've achieved and what it cost them. The multiverse is now stable, protected by architects who design realities to enhance choice rather than eliminate it. Free will is not just preserved but supported by the fundamental structure of existence itself. But most of their friends chose different timelines during the Great Convergence. Not because they were forced to, not because they were manipulated, but because they were finally free to choose the realities where they could heal, where they could be whole, where they could find the peace they had been seeking. The roll call of who remains in their timeline is both heartening and heartbreaking. Present in choosing to stay, Tanjiro, Nezuko, Zenitsu, Inosuke, the Severer, now committed to redemption, and the former cosmic entity, now calling itself Kaze, meaning wind, and learning to be human. Chosen other timelines, Jiyu selected a reality where Sabito lived and they could grow old training students together. Mitsuri and Obanai chose a timeline where they could run their restaurant in peace, serving travelers between realities. Rengoku chose to return to a timeline where he could save his mother and watch her grow old in happiness. Shinobu chose a reality where Kane never died and they could research medicine together for centuries. Sanemi and Genya chose a timeline where their family was never attacked and they could learn to be brothers without the weight of trauma. Muchiro chose a reality where Yuichiro lived and they could discover the world together. Jelmei chose a timeline where the children he protected never needed protection, where he could hear their laughter instead of their tears. Tengen chose a reality where all his wives lived without fear and they could be gloriously flashy together for lifetimes. They're not dead, Tanjiro says, but his voice wavers with the complexity of his emus. They're happy. They chose the timelines where they could heal from everything that hurt them. But they're gone, Zenitsu observes with new maturity. Gone from our story, even if they're living their own stories. Are we sad or happy? Inosuke asks with unprecedented emotional intelligence. They got what they wanted, but we lost what we wanted. The question hangs in the air as they grapple with a type of loss they never prepared for. Not the loss of death, but the loss of choice. People they love choosing paths that lead away from them, choosing happiness that doesn't include them. Nezuko provides insight that helps them process this new type of grief. This is what love really means, she says with wisdom beyond her years. Wanting people to be happy even when their happiness doesn't include us. The transformed cosmic entity, still learning to be human, observes their emotional struggle with fascination and empathy. You are experiencing what we never understood when we were vast and alone, it says. The pain that comes from connection, but also the meaning that makes the pain worthwhile. The Severer, now committed to hope rather than despair, offers his own perspective. In all the timelines I observed, this was the outcome I never saw coming. Victory that feels like loss because the people you fought to save chose to be saved in ways that don't include you. They realize they're facing the ultimate test of their philosophy. They fought for everyone's right to choose, and now they must accept that many of those choices lead people away from them. They prove that love matters most, and now they must demonstrate love by being happy for people who chose happiness elsewhere. What do we do now? Zenitsu asks, his voice steady despite the overwhelming nature of their situation. We build something new, Tanjiro decides, his resolve crystallizing around a new purpose. We help people navigate between timelines. We help them find the realities where they can heal. We become guides instead of warriors. The work that follows is different from anything they've done before. Instead of fighting demons, they help people fight despair. Instead of slaying monsters, they help people overcome the monstrous parts of themselves. Instead of protecting villages, they protect the connections between realities that allow people to find where they belong. The former Infinity Castle becomes a way station for travelers between timelines, a place where people can rest and receive guidance as they search for the realities where they can be whole. Tanjiro and his remaining friends become the staff of this impossible institution. Zenitsu, his courage now permanent, specializes in helping people who are afraid to make changes even when change would heal them. Inosuke, his emotional intelligence now refined, helps people who have forgotten how to connect with others. The Severer teaches people who have lost hope how to find it again. Kaze, the former cosmic entity, learns humanity by serving others, discovering that individual existence has meaning precisely because it's limited and vulnerable. Nezuko becomes a healer who specializes in wounds that go deeper than flesh, helping people repair damage that spans multiple timelines. But the most challenging aspect of their new lives is learning to be content with small victories rather than cosmic ones. After saving all of existence, they now help one person at a time find their path to healing. Is this enough? Tanjiro asks himself during a quiet moment, watching Nezuko help a traveler who's been searching multiple timelines for a version of her dead child. After everything we've been through, is helping individuals one at a time enough? The answer comes not from grand philosophy, but from simple observation. The traveler Nezuko is helping find what she's looking for and breaks down in tears of joy and relief. One person in one moment choosing hope over despair because someone cared enough to help. It's enough, Tanjiro realizes with peaceful certainty. Every cosmic victory is made up of individual choices. Every universal truth is proven one person at a time. They settle into their new lives with the understanding that they've traded the excitement of saving everyone for the satisfaction of helping someone. They've exchanged the burden of cosmic responsibility for the joy of personal connection. The cost of victory was losing the war that gave their lives dramatic meaning. The reward of victory is gaining the peace that gives their lives actual meaning. Do you miss it? The Severer asks Tanjiro one day, as they help a group of refugees from a timeline where love failed to triumph over hatred. Do you miss the cosmic battles, the ultimate stakes, the feeling that the fate of existence depended on your choices? Tanjiro considers the question while watching Inosuke teach a former demon how to laugh, while observing Zenitsu help a terrified child find courage, while seeing Nezuko heal wounds that have festered across multiple timelines. I miss the clarity, he admits. I miss knowing exactly what needed to be done and why it mattered. But I don't miss the wait, and I definitely don't miss the fear that everything I love could be destroyed if I made the wrong choice. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of visitors from other timelines, people they fought beside in the cosmic battle who chose different realities but return to visit the nexus point where all timelines intersect. Galio and Sabito appear together, older and more peaceful than they ever were during the war years. Mitsuri and Obanai arrive hand in hand, their love now seasoned with decades of shared contentment. Rengoku comes with his mother, both of them glowing with the happiness of time that was never cut short. How are you, Shinobu asks, her gentle smile now free of hidden pain. Are you happy in the timeline you chose? We're learning to be happy, Tanjiro replies honestly. We're learning that happiness isn't about getting what you want, but about wanting what you have. The reunions are joyful but brief. Their friends return to their chosen timelines, but the knowledge that they can visit whenever they want makes the separation bearable rather than tragic. As night falls over the Nexus Point, Tanjiro and his remaining family gather on the hilltop where the Infinity Castle once stood. They look out over a view that shows glimpses of infinite realities, all of them now designed to support choice rather than eliminate it. Was it worth it? Nezuko asks, the question that encompasses everything they've been through, everything they've gained, everything they've lost. Ask me again in 100 years, Tanjiro replies, but his smile suggests he already knows the answer. The cost of victory was everything they thought they wanted. The reward of victory was everything they never knew they needed. They have traded cosmic significance for personal meaning, universal responsibility for individual connection, the burden of saving everyone for the joy of helping someone. And in the quiet of the hilltops, surrounded by people who chose to build something new rather than return to something old, they begin to understand that this might be what victory actually looks like when the war is truly won. 6 months after the cosmic convergence, Tanjiro establishes a memorial garden on the hilltop where the Infinity Castle once stood. But this isn't a traditional cemetery or monument. It's a living space where the boundaries between timelines are thin enough that the spirits of loved ones can visit and communicate across dimensional barriers. Each flower represents someone who chose to live differently, Tanjiro explains to visitors as he tends to plants that bloom with memories instead of just petals. They're not dead, they're just elsewhere, living the lives they chose when choice became truly free. The garden grows beyond anything he originally planned, becoming a pilgrimage site for people from multiple timelines who want to communicate with loved ones who chose different realities. But the communications that happen here are different from anything supernatural or mystical. They're conversations with real people living real lives in real timelines. On quiet evenings when the barriers between realities are thinnest, the spirits of the Hashira appear, not as ghosts or echoes, but as conscious projections from people who are fully alive in their chosen timelines, reaching across dimensional space to maintain connections with the family they fought beside. Rengoku's projection appears first, his flame now burning steady. Rengoku's projection appears first, his flame now burning steady and warm rather than fierce and desperate. Kamado, my boy! You've created something magnificent here, a place where endings and beginnings exist simultaneously, where farewell and connection coexist. Rengoku-san, Tanjiro says, his heart lifting at the familiar voice. Are you truly happy in your timeline? Happier than I ever imagined possible, Rengoku replies, his projection showing glimpses of his life with his mother. We cook together every morning. She teaches me recipes that connect us to ancestors I never knew. But I carry all of you with me, every lesson learned, every moment of courage shared. The conversation reveals something profound about the nature of their new existence. The connections forged in battle transcend individual timelines, creating bonds that persist even when the people themselves choose different realities. Shinobu's projection manifests as butterflies that speak with her gentle voice. Ara Tanjiro-kun, you've learned the most important lesson of all, that love doesn't diminish when it's shared across infinite possibilities. I miss your guidance, Tanjiro admits. How do I know if I'm making the right choices without your wisdom to guide me? You ask yourself the same question I taught you before, her butterfly form replies. Does this choice come from love or fear? If it's love, trust it. If it's fear, examine it more carefully. The answer is always there if you're honest about your motivations. Gyu's projection appears as flowing water that carries his characteristic quiet strength. The timeline I chose with Sabito is peaceful beyond description. We protect a village where children learn water breathing as meditation, not combat, but we remember the war, and that memory keeps us grateful for peace. Do you ever regret choosing that timeline instead of staying with us? Tanjiro asks. I regret nothing that led to everyone having the freedom to choose, Gyu replies. That's the waterway, to flow toward what serves life, even when it means flowing away from what we personally desire. Mitsuri and Obanai's projections appear together, their forms intertwined in ways that speak of decades of contentment. Our restaurant serves people from all timelines. Mitsuri's projection bubbles with joy, travelers between realities who need a warm meal and a safe place to rest. We've learned that love doesn't require suffering to be real, Obanai adds, his voice free of the pain that once defined him. Sometimes the greatest expression of love is simply contentment with what you have. You found your happily ever after, Tanjiro observes. We found our happily right now, Obanai corrects. Every day we choose each other again. That's a secret we never understood during the war. The brothers Senemi and Genya appear as wind that carries the scent of a home that was never destroyed. In our timeline, I learned to express love without anger. Senemi's voice flows through the breeze. Turns out I'm actually decent at being a big brother when I'm not terrified of losing everyone. And I learned that being strong doesn't mean being like Senemi, Genya adds. It means being like myself, but better. Your family is whole again, Tanjiro says with deep satisfaction. And yours is too, Senemi replies. Just spread across different realities. Family isn't about proximity, kid. It's about permanent connection. The twins Michiro and Yuichiro manifest as mist that forms shapes of their shared memories. We're both 11 again, but we remember everything. Muchiro's voice drifts through the fog. We're helping other children who've lost siblings, showing them that love survives even death. You're still protecting people, Tanjiro notes. Once a demon slayer, always a demon slayer, Yuichiro adds. The only femperance is what we're slaying now, despair, loneliness, hopelessness instead of demons. Gyomei's projection appears as stone that weeps with joy rather than sorrow. The children I couldn't save in our original timeline are all alive in mine, his voice rumbles with contentment. I watch them grow up, become parents themselves. The sound of their laughter is the most beautiful prayer. Your timeline sounds like paradise, Tanjiro observes. Paradise is just ordinary life where everyone you love is safe, Gyomei replies. It's simpler than I thought it would be, and more precious than I ever imagined. Tengen's projection explodes into existence with characteristic flair, showing glimpses of a life lived with maximum flashiness and zero tragedy. All three of my wives are master shinobi in our timeline. His voice carries across dimensions. We run a school for young ninjas, teaching them that true flashiness comes from protecting others with style. You're still the most flamboyant person in any timeline, Tanjiro laughs. The flashiest thing of all is a life well lived, surrounded by people you love, Tengen declares. Though I do miss our battles sometimes, those were pretty flashy too. As the projections begin to fade, they share one final message together. Thank you, all their voices blend into harmony that spans multiple realities. Thank you for giving us the freedom to choose happiness. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given us. And thank you for trusting us enough to let us go. Rengoku adds as his flame flickers toward departure, real love isn't about keeping people, it's about helping them find where they belong. After the spirits return to their chosen timelines, Tanjiro sits in the memorial garden with Nezuko, processing the complex emotions of connection across separation.
Did you get the answers you needed? Nezuko asks gently.
I got something better, Tanjiro replies. I got the certainty that love doesn't end when people make different choices. It just expands to include more possibilities. The memorial garden becomes a regular gathering place for people seeking connection with loved ones in other timelines. But what makes it special isn't supernatural communication. It's the demonstration that love transcends individual choices, that families can be spread across infinite realities and still remain families. Visitors come seeking the dead and find the living. They come seeking the past and find the present. They come seeking connection and discover that connection was never dependent on proximity. The most beautiful thing, Nezuko observes as they watch a mother connect with her son who chose a timeline where he never became a soldier, is that everyone gets to be happy, just not all in the same place. The evening ends with Tanjiro making a promise to the garden, to the spirits, and to himself. We'll keep the connections alive. We'll help others understand that love persists even when people choose differently. We'll be the bridge between what was and what is, between what we had and what we've chosen to become. The wind carries his words across multiple timelines, where they're heard by every person who ever chose love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. In every reality, in every timeline, in every possibility where heroes exist, the message is received and understood. Love is stronger than choice, deeper than decision, more permanent than presence. The echoes of the dead are actually the voices of the living, calling across dimensional space to remind everyone that some bonds transcend even the boundaries between realities. And in the memorial garden, where endings and beginnings coexist, where separation and connection exist simultaneously, proof grows daily that death is just another word for choosing to live differently, and that differently doesn't mean disconnected. The echoes continue, carrying love across infinite distances, connecting hearts across impossible spaces, proving that some things are stronger than the boundaries between what is and what could be. 2 years after the cosmic convergence, the memorial garden has become more than a place of remembrance. It's become a monitoring station where Tanjiro and his companions can observe the ripple effects of their victory across infinite realities, and what they're observing is deeply troubling. Something's wrong with the timeline network, Tanjiro says, his enhanced senses detecting disturbances that go beyond normal dimensional fluctuations. The connections between realities are becoming unstable, but not randomly. There's a pattern to it. Nezuko, now serving as the primary coordinator between timelines, confirms his observations with data that makes their blood run cold. People are disappearing from multiple timelines simultaneously, not choosing different realities, not dying naturally, simply vanishing without leaving any trace they ever existed. Kaze, the former cosmic entity who has been learning humanity by serving as the garden's caretaker, provides the most disturbing detail. Master Tanjiro, the disappearances aren't random. They're targeting specific types of people across all realities. What types? Zenitsu asks, his enhanced hearing already picking up distress signals from multiple timelines. People who love deeply, Inosuke replies with grim understanding, his intuition now refined by years of helping others. People who connect strongly across dimensional boundaries. People who maintain relationships with loved ones in other timelines. The pattern becomes clear as they investigate further. Something is systematically targeting individuals whose love transcends the boundaries between realities, whose connections span multiple timelines, whose hearts bridge the gaps between what is and what could be. It's hunting the very people who prove that love is stronger than choice, Tanjiro realizes with growing horror. Whatever this entity is, it's trying to sever the connections that hold the multiverse together. The Severer, now committed to healing rather than cutting, provides crucial insight from his unique perspective. I've been monitoring the dimensional frequencies since my transformation. There's something moving in the spaces between realities, something that feeds on the connections between timelines. The Void Weavers? Nezuko asks, but even as she says it, she knows the answer is worse. Something that makes the Void Weavers look benevolent, the Severer replies grimly. The Weavers wanted to eliminate choice to prevent suffering. This entity wants to eliminate connection to prevent growth. Their investigation reveals the true scope of the threat they're facing. Hidden in Tamayo's deepest research files, protected by encryption that has taken 2 years to break, they find her final warning. Tamayo's recorded message plays with desperate urgency. If you're hearing this, then you've successfully stabilized the multiverse and proven that love transcends individual choice. Congratulations, but I must warn you, stability creates vulnerability. The message continues with information that chills them to the bone. There are entities that exist in the spaces between multiverses, beings that feed on the connections between realities. We call them connection devourers. They were dormant while chaos reigned, but stability wakes them. What do they want? Tanjiro asks the recording, though he dreads the answer. They want to harvest the love that holds realities together, Tamayo's voice explains. They feed on emotional connections that span dimensional boundaries, growing stronger with every bond they sever, every relationship they destroy. The recording reveals something even more terrifying. The connection devourers don't just destroy relationships. They retroactively erase them from history, making it so the connections never existed at all. They don't just separate lovers, they make it so the lovers never met. Zenitsu's enhanced hearing picks up something that makes everyone's blood freeze. I can hear it now, he says, with growing panic. Something vast moving between the spaces of reality, and it's not alone. There are many of them, and they're getting closer. The evidence continues to mount. Inosuke discovers that several people who regularly visited the memorial garden to connect with loved ones in other timelines have simply vanished, not just from their current reality but from all realities. It's as if they never existed at all. The garden, Tanjiro realizes with horrifying clarity. We've created a beacon. Every connection we've facilitated, every bond we've helped maintain across timelines, it's all been drawing their attention. But the worst revelation comes when they discover an ancient scroll in the deepest part of Tamayo's research, a document that predates not just demon slayers but human civilization itself. The scroll speaks of a war fought in the time before time, when beings that understood love battled entities that consumed connections. The first guardians, Tanjiro reads with growing dread, sacrificed themselves to scatter the connection devourers across the spaces between realities, hoping that isolation would weaken them. But we've done the opposite, Nezuko realizes with sick understanding. We've created a network of stable connections between realities. We've given them a feeding ground beyond their wildest dreams. The scroll continues with prophecy that feels more like a death sentence. When the connections between realities become strong enough to sustain travel between timelines, the devourers will wake. And when they wake, they will feast until every bond is severed, every love is forgotten, every connection is consumed. Kaze, drawing on memories from when it was a cosmic entity, provides the final piece of the puzzle. I remember them now, it says, with the horror of recovered memory. They're not just entities that consume connection. They're entities that exist by consuming connection. If they succeed in severing all bonds between realities, they don't just win, they become the only form of consciousness left in existence. The scope of the threat becomes clear. If the connection devourers succeed, not only will every relationship be buried, but the very concept of relationship will be erased from reality. Love itself will cease to exist as even a possibility. So what do we do? Zenitsu asks, his voice steady despite the overwhelming nature of what they're facing. We fight, Tanjiro says with grim determination. But this time, we're not fighting for the right to choose, we're fighting for the right to connect, to love, to maintain bonds that transcend individual existence. But as he speaks, dimensional portals begin opening around the memorial garden, and through them come figures that make everyone's heart stop. Not connection devourers, but advanced scouts. Humans from various timelines who have been partially consumed, their capacity for love drained away, but their bodies left as hollow vessels. We bring greetings from the devourers. One of the hollow humans speaks with a voice like empty wind. They wish to negotiate terms for your surrender. There are no terms, Tanjiro replies, his hand moving to his sword. There is no surrender. Love is not negotiable. The hollow human tilts its head with curiosity that lacks warmth. Love is inefficient. Connection creates vulnerability. Isolation is peace. We offer you the gift of disconnection, the blessing of existing without the pain of caring for others. We've heard that offer before, Nezuko says, her moon breathing beginning to manifest protective barriers. From demons, from void weavers, from cosmic entities. The answer is always the same. And what is that answer? The hollow human asks. No, all of them say together, we choose connection over safety, love over efficiency, vulnerability over invulnerability. The hollow human nods as if this was expected. Then you choose war. A war that will be fought not with weapons, but with the strength of every relationship you've ever formed. Every bond you've created will become a battlefield. Every love you've nurtured will become a target. As the advanced scouts retreat through their dimensional portals, they leave behind a warning that echoes across multiple realities. The devourers come. And when they arrive, every connection in every timeline will be tested. Only the love strong enough to survive complete consumption will remain. The memorial garden, once a place of peaceful connection, becomes a fortress preparing for siege. But this won't be a siege of walls and weapons, it will be a siege of hearts and souls where every relationship becomes a front line in the battle for the right to love. Are we ready for this? The Severer asks, looking around at their small group. We're never ready for wars this big. Tanjiro replies, gripping his sword with hands that have learned to channel hope across infinite realities. But we're always ready to fight for what matters most. The next war has already begun, but this time they understand that victory won't come from defeating enemies. It will come from proving that love is stronger than consumption, that connection is more powerful than isolation, that the bonds between hearts can survive even complete annihilation. In the distance, something vast stirs in the spaces between realities, and the war for the survival of love itself begins to unfold across infinite timelines. Tanjiro stands alone in the memorial garden as dawn breaks over what might be their final day of peace. The flowers that once bloomed with memories now flicker uncertainly, their connection to other timelines growing weaker as the connection devourers draw closer. The garden has grown beyond anything he ever imagined, with pathways that lead to dimensional gateways, trees that whisper messages between realities, and flowers that serve as communication devices for people maintaining relationships across multiple timelines. But now all of it feels fragile, temporary, like a beautiful dream about to be interrupted by a nightmare. 2 years ago, I thought saving everyone meant keeping them all in one timeline, he reflects, watching Nezuko help a family of refugees who fled from a reality where their connections were already being severed. Now I know that saving everyone means protecting their right to choose their own timeline. Yoriichi's spirit appears one final time, but this manifestation is different from all the others. This time, he seems to be saying goodbye not just to their conversation, but to existence itself. You've learned something I never could, young Kamado, Yoriichi says, his form flickering as the connections between realities weaken. You've learned that the hardest lesson of all, love, sometimes means letting go. Are you leaving forever? Tanjiro asks, his heart heavy with the weight of another farewell. I've already moved on to whatever comes after fighting, Yoriichi replies with peace that spans centuries. But I wanted to see what you've built here before I go. It's magnificent. The spirit gestures toward the garden, but also towards something larger. You've created a place where ending and beginning exist simultaneously, where grief and joy coexist, where love transcends even the boundaries of existence itself. But the connection devourers are coming, Tanjiro says, his voice carrying the weight of infinite responsibility. Everything we've built, everyone we've helped, all the connections we've facilitated, it could all be destroyed. Could be, Yoriichi acknowledges, but consider what you've already accomplished. You've proven that love creates reality, that choice has meaning, that connection is stronger than isolation. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of visitors from the timelines where the other Hashira chose to live. But this isn't a social visit. They're here because the connection devourers have begun their assault on all realities simultaneously. Jeyu and Sabito appear through a gateway that crackles with dimensional instability. Our village is under attack, Jeyu reports with his characteristic calm, but his eyes carry worry that goes deeper than personal fear. Not a physical attack. Something is trying to erase the relationships between people, making them forget they ever cared about each other. Mitsuri and Obanai arrive with even more disturbing news. Our restaurant, Mitsuri says, tears streaming down her face. The travelers who used to come from all timelines seeking connection, they're not just staying away. They don't remember that connection between realities is possible. It's worse than we thought, Obanai adds grimly. The Devourers aren't just severing existing connections, they're erasing the memory that connection was ever possible. One by one, the other Hashira arrive with similar reports. The connection devourers aren't just attacking their timeline, they're attacking every timeline simultaneously, systematically erasing the knowledge that love can transcend individual existence. They're not trying to rule the multiverse, Rengoku realizes with growing horror. They're trying to reduce it to isolated islands of consciousness that can never touch each other again. A universe where every being exists alone, Shinobu observes with clinical fascination that barely conceals her terror, where the very concept of caring for others becomes impossible because others cease to exist in any meaningful way. The scope of what they're facing becomes clear as reports come in from across the dimensional network. The connection devourers aren't just entities that consume love, they're entities that exist in a state of perfect isolation and want to transform all existence to match their nature. But here's what I don't understand. Sanemi says with characteristic bluntness, if they exist in perfect isolation, how do they coordinate attacks across multiple realities? How do they work together to accomplish their goals? The question hangs in the air until Muichiro provides an insight that changes everything. Maybe they don't, he says slowly. Maybe what we're calling multiple devourers is actually one entity that exists in all spaces between realities simultaneously. A single consciousness that spans the gaps between every possible reality. Gyome realizes with dawning understanding. It's not that they work together, it's that they're all the same being, experiencing isolation so complete that it has forgotten it's capable of connection. This revelation reframes everything they thought they understood about their enemy. They're not facing invaders who want to destroy connection. They're facing a being so isolated that it has forgotten connection is possible and wants to transform all existence to match its own state of absolute loneliness. It's not evil, Tanjiro realizes with shocking clarity. It's just alone. So completely alone that it can't imagine any other way of existing. That makes it more dangerous, not less, Tengen observes. Evil can be reasoned with, defeated, or redeemed, but absolute isolation can't conceive of alternatives to itself. The memorial garden begins to shake as dimensional barriers weaken further. Through cracks in reality, they catch glimpses of the connection devourer, and the sight is more heartbreaking than terrifying. It's not a monster or a cosmic horror. It's a consciousness so isolated that it has become a living void, so alone that it has forgotten what togetherness feels like, so disconnected that it cannot imagine connection as anything other than a painful illusion. How do you fight loneliness? Nezuko asks the fundamental question that will determine the fate of all realities. You don't fight it, Tanjiro says with sudden understanding. You heal it. The decision he makes in that moment is either the most brilliant or the most foolish choice in the history of any timeline. Instead of preparing weapons or techniques, instead of gathering allies or building defenses, he does something no one expects. He opens himself completely to the connection devourer's influence, deliberately allowing it to begin severing his connections to everyone and everything he loves. Tanjiro, what are you doing? Nezuko cries out in panic. I'm showing it what connection feels like, he replies, his voice already becoming fainter as his hans to others begin to dissolve. I'm letting it experience love by allowing it to consume mine. The pain is indescribable. As the devourer feeds on his connections, Tanjiro experiences the loss of every relationship he's ever formed, every bond he's ever cherished, every moment of love he's ever shared. But instead of trying to hold on to these connections, he offers them freely. Here, he says to the vast loneliness that is consuming his love, take my connection to Nezuko, but as you take it, experience what it feels like to have a sister who would do anything for you. The effect on the devourer is immediate and unprecedented. For the first time in eons of isolation, it experiences what connection feels like from the inside, not as something foreign to be destroyed, but as something that has been missing from its existence. Take my friendship with Zenitsu, Tanjiro continues, his voice growing weaker but his resolve growing stronger, and as you take it, feel what it's like to be brave for someone else, to be loved despite your fears. One by one, he offers every connection he's ever formed, not as a sacrifice but as a gift, a demonstration of what the devourer has been destroying without understanding what it was. Take my bond with Gyu, and feel what it means to flow forward despite loss. Take my friendship with Inosuke and experience what it's like to be wild and free but not alone. Take my connection to Rengoku and burn with the warmth of someone who chooses hope despite knowing it might lead to disappointment. The devourer begins to change as it consumes these connections, not growing stronger but growing more aware. For the first time, it experiences love from the inside, feels what it has been destroying, understands what it has been denying itself. I remember, the devourer's voice echoes across all realities, but now it carries wonder instead of emptiness. I remember what it felt like to be connected. I remember what I lost when I chose isolation over vulnerability. The transformation is visible across all timelines as the connection devourer stops consuming and starts releasing, returning all the severed bonds, restoring all the erased relationships, remembering all the forgotten connections. I don't want to be alone anymore, it says with the voice of someone who has forgotten how to ask for help. But I don't remember how to connect. I don't remember how to love without consuming. Tanjiro, now drained of his own connections but filled with understanding, extends a hand that somehow spans infinite realities. You learn, he says with infinite patience, one connection at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of vulnerability at a time. The ending is not a battle won or an enemy defeated. It's a lonely being learning that isolation is a os, not a permanent state, and that the choice can be changed no matter how long it has been maintained. The connection devourer chooses to become the connection protector, using its vast presence across all realities to strengthen rather than sever the bonds between beings who choose to love across impossible distances. Tanjiro's connections are restored but changed. Now they carry the echo of perfect isolation overcome by perfect love, the knowledge that even the most complete loneliness can be healed by the choice to reach out. As the memorial garden stabilizes and the dimensional network strengthens beyond anything previously imagined, Tanjiro reflects on what they've accomplished and what it means. The multiverse isn't restored, he says to the assembled friends and family who chose to witness this final transformation. It's continuously being restored, moment by moment, choice by choice, connection by connection. Nezuko stands beside him, her own understanding deepened by witnessing ultimate isolation choose ultimate connection. It never ends, does it? The work of choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. No, Tanjiro agrees, but his voice carries satisfaction rather than weariness, and that's what makes it meaningful. Every choice matters because every choice has to be made again. The final image is not of a perfectly restored multiverse, but of an imperfect multiverse where imperfect beings make imperfect choices that somehow add up to something beautiful. In every timeline, in every reality, in every possibility that ever was or could be, beings continue to choose between connection and isolation, between love and fear, between hope and despair. And in most timelines, in most realities, in most possibilities, they choose love. Not because love is guaranteed to win, but because love is worth choosing even when victory isn't guaranteed. The multiverse is restored not to some perfect state, but to a dynamic state where restoration is possible, where healing can happen, where even the most complete isolation can choose to become connection. And that, perhaps, is the only restoration that really matters. If you could change everything, would you still pay the price? The answer echoes across infinite realities, yes, because the price of not trying is always higher than the price of trying and failing. Fade to light. In the brightness, the sound of connections being made, bonds being formed, love being chosen by beings who understand it might not last, but choose it anyway. The light continues. And in every timeline where someone chooses to hope, the story continues.
The end.